yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Never not, never under yard, never ever, I'm forever on. Check my repertoire, check my repertoire, don't check me not. Let's just checks involved. I've been feeling like I'm next to God, next to God, next to God.
Welcome to the Brothers in Time podcast. This is season 3 Guardians. I'm joined again by Brick, and this time we're going to be joined by Juan. All right, so today's conversation is going to be a little bit different. I get into some pretty heated arguments on Facebook, and I kind of wanted to get my buddies, their opinions about this argument and some of y'all's opinions as well. So we'll go right into it. So this was a conversation that a friend of mine started, or a comment that he started. So if it's in green, it's going to be my buddy talking. So last night at the daiquiri shop, Black lives didn't matter, no self-respect or value, but folks want change from other skin tones. So essentially what he's trying to say is like somebody had gotten shot at a daiquiri store around the way from his house. And he's saying that there's more black on black crime. And if we can't do it within our own culture, why do we expect anybody else to? You know what I mean? He was just trying to make it like a little bit of a statement. That was really it. But this other guy, he says, if there is no good or evil or sin, this should not be a problem. So when he's saying here, I recall being told that there is no good or evil, me and my friend had a conversation about how there is no such thing as good or evil. And this dude commented, and we got in a pretty big argument then as well. So he said, I also recall saying that humans are inherently evil, and there was an argument against that. But then we get these more clear examples of human evil when a lady was killed on her birthday. It takes more energy for us to do good than to do evil. We have to restrain the evil and at times force the good. Evil is more natural to the human heart. I bet it felt very natural for them to murder. So to this thread specifically, I respond, please stop. So you are telling me that it would be more natural for you to murder someone than to not. You are human after all. So you are saying you have to restrain yourself daily from murder because God made us this way? Bruh. All right. Wait, at any point, Hudson, when you want me to stop. So that
no, keep going, man. Yeah. That's this guy.
So,
that's a silly statement.
So then there was a third man who tried to co-sign for my boy, or for this other dude, and said, murder may not be on your mind daily, but something evil is. Anger, hatred, jealousy, unforgiveness, pride, lust, etc. I'm assuming he means these. All these things are easier to do rather than the right thing. Consider a baby. You don't have to teach a baby to rebel, but you do have to teach them to obey. Although baby is not aware of their sin, they for sure do a lot of wrong things. So there's another thread, right? In this original one, if there is no good or evil, those 19 replies, this is where that takes a pretty weird turn. So if there is no good or evil or sin, this should not be a problem. And then my buddy responds, that conversation didn't go anywhere with you, but the individuals on the post understood what was being conversed. Then the other response is, the incident was evil. If it was not, then you should not have any moral frustration about a woman being murdered. It's a neutral event with no significance and no moral value. On her birthday, you even emphasized what makes it more evil. This really isn't that conversation because, like I just stated, you won't understand it, so it won't go anywhere. No point in carrying on when it won't get understood. You don't understand because you said there is no good or evil. Now you are implying that doesn't mean what it says, which is nonsense, because all of the philosophies are ultimately nonsense. That is why I can't understand, because in the English language, saying there is no good or evil means there is no good or evil. But now you are acting like that's not what you meant. So yeah, I'm confused because you are using words with literal meaning and then not acknowledging them or living by them. Frustration over any action because of moral reason implies that evil exists. I'm genuinely confused. And then he starts talking about God as a woman. There's no good and evil. Truth is relative. He's essentially talking shit about the conversation from before. So then you told me it's only evil to the person thinking it's evil, and I said, then you can't have an issue with someone else's actions or criticize them. I'm here to tell you that fresh off a woman being killed on her birthday, that is an evil act, objectively speaking, regardless of personal opinion. That action is morally evil, and not just because I think it's evil. Our God-given moral conscience tells us all that. That act is evil. We all internally agree that murder was wrong, evil, or even if you want to sugarcoat it and call it dumb, still our moral radar went off. And then my boy said, you got it, bro. So this is when I respond. So I truly hope you can understand Fibonacci or Pythagorean systems. A plus B equals C. My avatar, my physical body is hardwired to keep my observer, my consciousness alive. We are all born, we are all going to die. Ergo, the mean analogy in the above parameters is life. Preservation of life is what every conscious being wants. You don't have to invoke Deus Vult in order to be moral. Deus Vult means God's will. Does evil exist? Sounds like, does evil partake of being? Can some act be evil? Sure, but that still is relative. Hypothetically speaking, let's say I have a planet. This planet has a sentient species on it that has all but doomed itself to become extinct from over-harvesting, non-renewable resources, etc. Let's say if 60% of the population was removed tomorrow, the damage could be reversed and the species would be saved for posterity. I decide to kill 60% of the population either by random or based on their contribution to the growth of the society. This is nuanced for sure, but doesn't change my point. Would my decision to kill 60% be evil? Yes, it would be evil to kill billions of people to preserve your own life and a few other billion. Murder is evil, especially if those people do not consent to die. The only way it is not evil is if there is no moral standard, but human nature comes with morality, so there is always a standard. That's not what I'm saying. You have added to my words. Self-preservation at the expense of others who are not immediate threat to your life is evil. The example you just gave as a noble reason to kill millions of people is evil. What you just said could be compared to the thinking of Adolf Hitler. Billions of people, men, women, and children, who likely would die fighting to live. And then that guy from the beginning. And Thanos. Even movie writers know it's evil. Okay, so before I respond, I would like to preface my response with an assumption in order to respond to both you and the other guy. My assumption would be that your views on children would mirror his comments, speaking generally, of course. I fully understand you are an individual and probably differ in some facet of the situation. If I am wrong, I only ask that you clarify your position so I don't strawman you. This is a continuation of a conversation from another post months ago, but I appreciate your contribution. What you said presupposes evil's existence. Furthermore, it prescribes that those things are wrong with no discernible reason as for why, whether I agree with the prescription or not. I can only assume that you would say sins are bad because God said so. In my opinion, that would be logically consistent with your comment about children and obedience. This is where we fundamentally disagree. When I consider a baby, I don't believe rebellion is a negative trait. Without rebellion, we would still have a prevalent slave trade. Without rebellion, we would still have maladaptive ideology. So when you say rebellion, I say growth. You then said they need to be taught to obey. Once again, I disagree. To me, that is to say that all parents are ineffable. We both know that this is not true. If I can wrap up what you are saying in a concise statement, it would be that parents need to dictate to children what they can and can't do and suppress opposition. I apologize if you feel as if I had added to your words. You were making a comparison of evil and murder, so I just continued it. So firstly, I never said my life. I was the owner of this planet. Secondly, I never said if it was right or wrong. I was asking your opinion. But I doubt that distinction would change your answer. So by your logic, you want to preserve life for one generation, regardless of the impact it has on the future. The only way that makes sense to me as a moral standard is your belief in heaven. I'm not arguing for or against its existence, just to be clear. If I get to go to the good place, then who cares what happens here? Your point originally is that all humans are inclined to evil naturally. I disagree. Look at a baby. Are they born racist, or is that a learned trait? I can concede that a small subsection of humans are born with conditions that fall outside what we would consider normal parameters. However, that is not all humans. It's not normal to want to kill people, barring any infringement on your basic human needs. We learn that from experiences passed down from generation to generation and the shedding of beliefs and the acceptance of new ones. We don't need to think or speak in binary anymore. And that is the end. And I really would like your reaction to this.
Yes. So One thing I would like to know, though, is how did these guys define evil? Because they talked about a baby being inherently evil, and then also murder using the same descriptive word as evil, which I've never seen a toddler go up to another and just be inherently evil to that kid, right? Like, never have they just walked up to another child and started hitting them. It's usually provoked or something. Usually when I've seen kids interact with each other, it's at a pleasant level. They're playing. That's the natural course, is that they're like, hey, friend, whatever, you're like me. Let's be like each other. I think we just had this conversation not too long ago about murder in general, that even murder, which is deemed one of the highest societal crimes, is a gray area. So in the case of this murder that's being talked about in this situation, from what we know, yes, evil action. We don't know the history. I don't. I haven't even seen this news story, to be honest with you. I don't know if the shooter, or it was gun.
It was almost a year ago.
Okay. Did the shooter know the victim, or was it indiscriminate? Do you remember?
I honestly don't. I don't know.
So if let's err on the side of actual evil, right? It's an indiscriminate shooting. The shooter had no connection to that female. He just fired, killed that woman. Terrible. However, right? If you shoot and kill your daughter's rapist, is that an evil action? Or is that vengeance? And to default that having jealousy, so that individual said that, you might not think about murder every day, but you'll think about jealousy or lust. Those are evil? That's evil to you? That's how low this bar is? Like, lust is evil? Bro, like, you go on Instagram and you're like, damn, bro, like, you're looking at girls, like, that's not evil. Maybe it's not moral, but it's not evil. It's very curious.
I have an issue with this presupposition that for you to have a moral standard, that means that there must be a God. Yeah. And I understand that there's like a rhetorical device that they're using there, and it's about what the definitions are.
Sure.
But when you're personifying God as like some outside entity that has its own like intent, I have an issue with that.
So I'm willing to bet for mankind, tribalism existed before gods.
Yes.
The idea of like needing to stick with the guy next to you and not stab him probably existed before they started looking up and seeing stars and being like, creationism. So that's flawed in nature, that argument. So
the bigger thing that I had the issue with was it's this preservation of self that they were presenting during this entire argument, right? Like, the entire species that I was talking about is going to die if you don't change your behavior, if something does not change. And they're still willing to continue that just because of what? I don't fully understand that logic.
It sounds like, or at least it looked like the predisposition of evil, right? So it's evil to kill. And that's exactly where their baseline is. Well, their baseline is actually lust is evil. So that expanded to, if you had to kill 60% of a planet to preserve 40%, to rather more or less preserve the entire species for longevity purposes, that's just evil, period. So I think you hit the nail on the head that if you believe in the good place, that after it's all said and done, you go to your star field or whatever it is, like, then all's good, right? Because you died when you were supposed to, and it was already set in stone, and there's no worries. Like,
it's for me, it's like nothing that it happens here matters. Then, if that's truly your belief, is that once I die, I'm going to go to this good place. That even the presupposition of that doesn't make sense to me. Because imagine for a moment, have you ever seen the TV show The Good Place?
No.
So I'm going to brief synopsis. Basically, these people die. They actually go to hell, and then hell is pretending to be heaven, and it's supposed to like torture them or whatever. And then they go through a couple seasons of like, fucking comedy drama type shit. And then they actually end up in the real good place. And then all the people that run the good place like sign it over to them, and they're like, yo, we're out, fuck this, and bounce. And they're like, what the fuck? And then they get in there and everybody's like, there's only like 20 people in there basically. And they're all like mentally retarded now, because just imagine perfection forever. What would you actually do? Like, how much shit is there to actually do?
You wouldn't grow.
Well, there'd be no reason to do anything fun.
Yeah.
I mean, well, for me, so let me say that for myself. I think it's fun to take risks. I think it's fun to get on a dirt bike and go as fast as you can, or a street bike and go as fast as you can, or bungee jump, or climb.
But how many years? You could do all of that.
But there would be no fun to it because there's no risk. There's no adrenaline dump because there's nothing there. You know you're okay.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
There's a weird thing that I've heard. Have you guys ever watched the show Meat Eaters?
Yeah.
No.
So the host Steven Rinella has a conversation with I think it's Joe Rogan on levels of fun, right? And he says like if you go to like Disneyland, right, or whatever, and you go on a roller coaster, like that's the cheapest form of fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in the moment you're like, sweet, that is so fun. But then they're on like this hard hunt or whatever, and they're struggling. It's raining, they don't fucking see anything. And he goes, in the moment you're like, damn, this sucks, but you and your friends will look back on that and be like, that experience was like a super fun experience because we learned a lot even though it sucked, right?
That's the entire military.
Deployments,
everything
right?
In retrospect is fun.
Deployments are shitty at times, but you look back and you're like, that was some of the best times of my life, right?
Yep.
But in this, what I'm trying to say is, in the show, eventually what they do is they open up a door that says it can end. Everything can end. We don't know what's on the other side of this door. You can just like restart, right? And it's like reincarnation. And it's like when you're in the good place for, I'll give you 1,000 years, and you do everything that you can possibly imagine to do that you would find entertainment out of or whatever, it would eventually get boring.
Mm-hmm.
It would eventually come to a point where it's like, yo, this is fucking kind of dumb. Like, I want to do something new.
Right.
And that's where that whole system doesn't make sense to me.
So there was a philosopher that spoke on that, and I can't remember who it is, but I know I've heard that same presentation before of like, eventually in heaven you will get bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, I would think so. And most religions base it exactly on the idea that this is perpetual euphoria. So for instance, I'm assuming everyone here has had a surgery or something to get like hydrocodones or fentanyl or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
That feeling is fucking dope. Like, that's a great feeling, dude, where everything's just a little out of touch. You know what I mean? It's just right out of your reach, and there's no feeling of hunger or sadness or anything. There's no state. You're idle. It's space. And I assume that's the feeling that they try to convey in a heaven type setting, is that you're perpetually on hydros. That's heaven.
But we see what that does.
Hell yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We see that in reality, what being perpetually on hydros does to you.
Yeah.
So back to the logic system of like, you think that you're going to get this amazing reward for being pious through your whole life. So essentially you're repressing your core natures, or like, I would make an analogy of like working someplace that I absolutely hated for my entire life just because I can retire and get a good like, why am I going to suffer my whole life? The only thing I get is time. That's all I get in life. That is it. And it's a commodity when you think about like economics. That's the only commodity we're born with. Right? Well, that and attention. And I can spend those two things on whatever I want. Why would I spend them on shit that I hate?
Right.
On shit that sucks. But then you come on the other side of that spectrum and you get into hedonism, where like it's, oh, everything is feel good and whatever makes me feel good and this, that, and the other. So there is a level of repression that you have to do in order to get some larger goal in mind. So.
Yeah. So the idea that, so I've been saying this for a while, I think we talked about this when we met up, is that, you know, the only variable you have that's even adjustable in modern society, or at least the way I live, is time. So that's the only thing you can sacrifice or allocate to different regions. So if you if you have 10 hours a day are dedicated to labor, you have to go to your job, right? And then when I was in school at the same time, there was at least another 2 to 3 hours to 4 hours on bad days, right? That was dedicated to school. So there we've lost 14 hours of time. Okay, I have to go to the gym. I have to maintain my body for, you know, the various things that we do. So there goes another hour and a half to 2 hours. So now we're up to 16 hours of your day is just gone. Okay, you want to relax for a little bit. You want to commit some time to maybe your family or friends or whatever that is. We can say another 2 hours. So now we're at 18 hours of your day is gone and you have 6 hours left. Well, an hour on the front and back of that are going to be for getting ready and tearing down from work, whatever that is, be it showering, shit, shave, all that stuff. So you've left yourself 4 hours for a day to sleep. So the only sacrifice or sacrificial time that you have, or what I had for several years, was sleep. So my sleep deprivation was so heavy in my life that it became unhealthy. Yeah. And now I'm making this conscious effort to like chill the fuck out. Like relax, like find that time to just lay on the couch, take that nap, bitch. You know what I mean? Like I graduated from school, I have that time back. The issue is now the introduction of more variables, because if you paint success as financial success, which most people do, most of your time goes to labor, whatever that is, be it personal projects or the job that you have, or God forbid the guard, you know. You're putting that time into those areas because you've allocated them as essential or the most important version of what you can do. It's hard to boil down the time investment of like, okay, am I going to look back at this in the future and be like, that was the worst possible use of my time and I could have just relaxed, whatever, slowed down, right?
Well, I feel like that goes back to two things. It's not just time that you have, it's your attention. It's what and that doesn't mean in the physical all the time. It can be just strictly in your mental space. So what are you paying attention to? So when, back to that conversation, when they're paying attention to evil that way, everything's going to look evil. And if your baseline core programming says that lust, jealousy, anger, these like natural human emotions are evil, what do you say? What does that conversation look like in your mind? Right. You know what I mean? And then when you're, and I think me and Juan have talked about this a lot. Our ultimate goal is like to achieve a good work-life balance, like to where I'm enjoying myself on both ends of that spectrum, and it's about figuring out what it is that I actually want at the end of the day. Right. And for me personally, on that priority list that you had, my family would be on the top. Like I give a fuck about a job. Right. I want to be there for my kids. And that goes back to like my childhood, you know what I mean? About my parents not being there and whoop to whoop and yada yada. So I have different priorities than other people. And that's what makes me specifically happy. And I feel like a big problem that I have with organized religion is they try to dictate what your priorities should be.
Dude, agreed.
And it's like, well, that works for you, but that doesn't work for me.
Right. So with what you just said, it kind of provoked the thought processes of that, you know, you can be at work, but you don't have to be at work mentally.
Facts.
You can be checked the fuck out, right? Like, so you could be at shift work, right? But you're still texting your wife, thinking about your kids, prepping things for them, whatever that case might be. Or on even the opposite spectrum, you can become, it's so easy in today's world to get your confirmation bias for your shit. So if you're fixated on the evils of America or the evils of the world and woe is this planet and everything is terrible, it is so easy to get your fix on that shit. Yeah. It's just the same as if you're like really optimistic and you're like, the world is great, everything's awesome. You start liking the right posts on Instagram or watching the videos on YouTube or on Twitter or whatever, you narrow your vision again into everything is awesome and nothing is bad. Yeah. My journey with organized religion was very much so force-fed, right? So as a kid, my folks were Mormon, so it was a lot of Mormon indoctrination at a young age. And then the majority of my childhood, so maybe 5 to 12, somewhere in that frame, it was at a Lutheran church, which still to this day, I'm not 100% sure on like the difference between a Baptist, a Lutheran, a Catholic. It's
the
more or less.
idiosyncrasies
Mhm.
are childish. It's like
Because I
about
know that,
election and like
right.
prudence, and it's
Yeah.
it's
That's small,
And,
yeah.
and I know with baptism, it's more or less like no matter what you did yesterday, God loves you today.
yeah.
You just have to let him forgive you and forgive yourself. So that's like the Baptist way, is that it doesn't matter what was then, it matters what's right now. And that's the rinse and repeat cycle of that. I'm not sure with Lutheran. I was too young to understand really what was happening. But I know that in my youth, in my teenage years, I drove myself to my own baptism. Like I thought it was going to be this spiritual event. I hadn't been baptized. I thought it was going to be this huge come to God moment, right? That I was going to feel some shit, dude. Like I thought it was going to be this powerhouse emotional set. So I was like 16, dude. I drove in there. The guy like slapped me in the pool, and like there was no no feeling tied to it, dude. Like I remember driving away from it, and I was like, "What the fuck was that? Like, what the fuck was that, dude?"
Yeah.
Did this man just bathe me?
Yeah, like it was like super strange. Like it just didn't hold any value at the time. So I remember the conscious efforts after that of being like, okay, I need to reevaluate all of this shit, all of this. So I stopped going to church. I stopped really thinking about it. I stopped, or rather, actively trying to not think about it, and going against some of the belief systems that were instilled into me.
Which
and then,
I'm sure was rough.
oh, it was
It
horrible.
was rough.
Yeah, there's no way, like after 16 years, or I'll say 13 years, 12 years of like dedicated, like God is good and God loves me and I love God and God, and these are my moral sets given to me by pallets of stone and shit.
Yeah.
To go against that was difficult. But when I got into active duty, I took it upon myself to become very active in seeking my God. I went to mosques, I went to synagogues, I went to a Pentecostal church, which was the weirdest fucking event of my life. I'm not saying what they're doing is wrong. I've never seen someone scream and cry and get smacked by the pastor and like speaking in tongues and shit. Yeah, like it was like a weird, like, oh my God. Like I spent some time at a Buddhist temple. I did a lot of more meditation and spiritual journey shit. I actually let the Mormon missionaries into my home. I'm like one of the few people that was like, yeah, come in, bro. I went to church with them, and immediately the first words out of like another guy's mouth was, "We wear our Sundays best for God," because I was in jeans, and I was like, bro, fuck you. I'm a E2 in the army, bro. I can't even afford slacks. Like, I'm buying beer, bro. Like, so I definitely tried to locate that God for me. And after time, you see a bunch of patterns in that. You see all the repetitious, like, okay, this is why this exists, and here's our creation story, and here's how it became. And you also hear some of the weirdest sentences ever. Such as I asked in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain is banished to the land of Nod after he kills Abel, right? And I was like, where the fuck is Nod? And the dude was like, why do you think Africa is so shitty? And I was like, oh my God, like, no, oh my God, dude, like, that's your opinion? Like, that's the whole land of Nod is the continent? Like, Jesus Christ, dude, like, how do you get there? How do you get there?
So in that journey, right, because I had some similar journey where like I got pushed away from Christianity pretty hard because of some of the things that they were doing and saying, and like the way that you had to be while you were, it didn't fit right with me because of the reasons I said earlier. And it pushed me so far away at one point that I became like atheist. Yeah. And then it was a slow journey back to becoming agnostic. Mm-hmm. But the hard part for me was like these mental, you would call them schemas, like these world views or lenses in which you view the world, that these dudes that I was having this conversation with still view it that way. So imagine for a second, everything you see on Instagram or the TV or all of that stuff is the devil. It's evil, and it's the devil. And the devil is trying to get you at all times. You know how paranoid that makes you?
Fuck.
Do you know how terrifying that is?
But you know what's so funny about that is a lot of the people that believe that stuff are the biggest hypocrites ever, because they're just fucking locking themselves in the bathroom and watching like copious amounts of porn.
Yeah.
But it's for the devil, like.
Yeah. Yeah. They're repressing certain parts of themselves.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're going through that experience, it's absolutely terrifying, because you have this modality of thought of like, everything can be good if I'm just obedient to this cosmic male figure. And then the moment you start trying to step out of that, your brain, like, I remember literally being afraid that the devil was taking me. And I'm like, and then I see what these things are, like Pokemon cards, bro. Like, my grandma used to tell me Pokemon was the devil. And I'm like, how the fuck is a little cartoon? Like, now that I'm a grown man, I'm like, yo, what the fuck does it matter about this cartoon? Like, what does it matter? Like, my kids aren't going to go rape people, right? If my kids aren't doing that kind of a thing, or if I'm not doing that kind of a thing, what the fuck does it matter? And then you start talking about this during that journey, or when now that I'm out of it, and now that it seems like you're out of that journey too, when you turn around and you look at people who are still going through it, it's like half of our country over this last year with this QAnon movement was these religious beliefs being projected onto reality of like terror and fear, and it's a mental problem, not this actuality problem. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So the QAnon stuff is really funny. Well, not funny, but that's the wrong word. But anyway, it was like onset schizophrenia for the entire fucking country. So it like verified a bunch of shit, right?
Yeah.
Because like a conspiracy theory got proven true.
Which one? Let's be specific, because I know.
So was it? Which one was the spark of QAnon?
Well,
like
a lot of it was the Jeffrey Epstein stuff.
Correct. There we go. Okay, sorry, man. So this thing basically more or less gets proven true, right? That there's a fuck island, fuck island, right?
Yep.
And so you had a bunch of people that have been baselined their entire existence in America's the best country, and they do nothing wrong, and we are saints, and we are the world police, and we are great.
Yep.
And then it came out that there's fuck island, and a lot of politicians have been to it. Yep. So now who's to say that the country didn't kill JFK? Who's to say that 9/11 wasn't an inside job? Why did we invade Iraq? Are you sure we were the good guys in World War II? Like,
what happened in Nicaragua?
Dude, yeah, like, it was Grenada really like a nice thing? Like, did we help anybody? Yeah. So it's like the Gulf of Tonkin, that got proven true. Like, you're looking at things that like the country attempted to launch these things, CIA operations, all this shit, right? So it was like onset schizophrenia, dude. And so a lot of times at my work, I deal with schizophrenic people. And there's a common misconception of schizophrenia that it's like this, you're seeing apparitions, and sure, maybe at some extreme level, that might be true.
Spectrum, yeah.
Sure. The majority of schizophrenic people I deal with it's paranoia without any sort of, it's jumping to conclusions of paranoia. Right.
The thought processes are tangential. They don't connect.
No. So for instance, like a good example is like, I put this can on this side of my hand, right? I'll rotate it for the camera. Okay. So I think I put it right here before I went to sleep. I go to sleep, I wake up, and the can is over here now. Now I could have put the can here. I'm not 100% sure. Somebody broke in last night and moved that fucking can. Yeah. And then I look at my doors and I notice that there's strips like paint on the screws of the hinges. They didn't unlock my door. They unscrewed the door, came in, moved the can, maybe used it for crimes, and then re-screwed in the door. And this is like factual shit in their head, man. Yep. So it's very interesting to see that type of thought process and then what they do with that. It's what we had with the QAnon is like literally the realization of that for everyone over 45. Like they all dove into this, or a lot of them did. I won't say all. A plethora of very vocal folk on the internet dove into this thing where it's, well, if A is A, then B must be B, and C must be C, and so on and so forth.
So real quick, for like
I guess
Yeah.
listeners who don't know what that sort of movement is, a QAnon movement, could you explain it for them a little bit?
Danley, I think you can do it better than I can, man.
All right, so the QAnon movement is like it's like an offshoot of Anonymous, basically, and what it was a bunch of conspiracy theories that they were trying to prove true. I think it was like WW1GGWA or some weird Instagram post. And the weird link is that Trump, when he was president, would do like shout outs to QAnon. So QAnon would do like a post on Reddit and would say, follow the white rabbit, and then would say some phrase. And then Trump would come out in a news conference the next day and say that phrase. So it was like color by numbers conspiracy theorists. So you would be on a Reddit post and you would be following all these Reddit posts that are like, it's a closed loop system within this Reddit. And it would be just these conspiracy theories that have existed since like the early 2000s. But then they're adding values. And like, I remember one of them was the two ships that were outside of New York. They were like pulling children out of tunnels underground. One of the posts was, there's a giant military movement in all of Europe, and we're overthrowing the Vatican, and we're getting out all of these kids out of the Vatican. And it's just a bunch. It was essentially a bunch of conspiracy. It was. I personally believe it was the propaganda machine for the Trump administration. I think that's what it was.
Gotcha.
Well, it's easy to create a cult following if you can baseline everything. That is like you always getting a confirmation on what you're reading.
When we're talking about in that post, one of the things that I said, which I feel like I brushed over a little bit when I said, I hope you can understand Pythagorean theorems and the Fibonacci sequence. So A plus B equals C, right? 1 plus 2 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5, 5 plus 3 equals 8. That's the Fibonacci sequence. It's a sequence of growth. So when we're talking about A would be expectancy. So beliefs about the link between trying to perform a behavior and actually performing it well. B is a belief that performing a given behavior is associated with a particular outcome is here. And then C is the value that a person places on the outcome. So when we're talking about A plus B equals C, or this plus this equals this, you're putting value to things that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So when we're talking about facts, so the biggest thing that I absolutely cannot stand is when people say facts don't care about your feelings. The only reason you're picking those facts is because of your feelings. There is an equally valid argument on the other side of the spectrum that proves the same shit, but it just has a different outcome. And it's about the same issue that I was having in that conversation about evil. So their value system or their intensity of these evils, for them, it's a straight plane. It's linear. It's just all fucking wrong. Well, sometimes it's you know what I mean? Sometimes it's okay to murder. We've already established that with like, if a dude's trying to kill me, I can kill him. That's one way. If a dude's trying to kill you, that's another way. If a dude's trying to kill my family, that's another way. You know what I'm saying? There's a bunch of different gray areas there. And I feel like the biggest issue is that people believe that, you know, it's almost like what they see is what they get. And there is no possibility of something being different at all. So with these QAnon people specifically with this belief system that these kids are being molested, right? And if we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein specifically, what ends up coming out is they talk about satanic rituals, right? So if you believe, this is my issue, is if you believe in the devil, okay, you believe these people are performing these rituals, the logical conclusion to that is that these rituals work. So what you're telling me is that butt fucking kids gives them special powers. I refuse to believe that.
So most of the people that they buy into that, they buy into like possession and demonic occupation of homes, and it expands on itself over and over again. That it's if my house can be haunted, then the guy banging the kid can get superpowers, or drinking the blood of a baby, or whatever it is. You can gain something from that. So it consistently expands upon itself.
But it would consistently expand on the other side of that argument too, with good. Yeah. So we should be doing more good to counteract that. So at some point, I would gain special powers from saving people. You know what I mean? At some point, I would gain special powers from being more of a socialist, being more productive in the society as a whole. So that's kind of where the cognitive dissonance between those two things, for me, I have a problem. So with the Jeffrey Epstein thing, so a little bit of specificity. Jeffrey Epstein, I think he was arrested in like 2004 or 2006. He went to prison, and it was for a rape of an underage minor or sex with an underage person. I can't remember which one, but he was allowed work release during the week. He was also allowed visitations in prison by underage people without supervision. That's crazy to me, right? So it comes out that he's actually an intelligence asset for like the CIA, where what he was doing on this island was he would be bringing in foreign nationals or like princes and whatever from other countries. They would throw these huge lavish parties. There'd be, some younger girls or whatever, 21, 20, 19, 18. And then they would slip in some super young ones, and they would record these people sleeping with them and then use it as blackmail so that they can get these other people to do it. So that was like how we ran business for a while. And then the politicians kind of knew about that, is what at the end of the day, what that whole conspiracy is about. But what ends up happening when you're viewing this through the lens of these Christian values or views, where they're doing satanic worship and whatever, the question is becoming like, do they get powers? Or why do you think people fuck kids? Right? For me, it's because they want to. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's because they fucking want to. That's just me personally. That feels like it's logically consistent. But this other theory that was coming out was about the Wuhan lab. So when COVID first started, they had this Wuhan lab leak theory, which is coming out that it is a potentiality. Okay, so sure, cool, it might be possible, but at the same time, what they were saying was that there was this chemical that was being created called adrenochrome, which what they say is that when you're traumatizing a child, like you tie them up to a tree and you beat them, you rip their face off or whatever, the child produces something in their pineal gland called some type of an adrenaline release. And it's this chemical that they can distill into adrenochrome, which then these powerful people ingest, and it gives them longevity of life. So what they're talking about is literally the fucking fountain of youth. You see that, like, so on the other end of that spectrum, what you're afraid of is dying. You're afraid of dying, and you think that these people that beat the system somehow, and that they're in control of the whole world. And then that would build on itself to, you believe essentially in vampires, that there's this group of elites that live forever, that control everything, and they've been pulling the strings since the 2000s. And we talked about this in our other, not the 2000s, but, well, I guess the 2000s, like since Jesus was born. But we talked about this with Sanchez, and it's, if you truly believe that that there's this secret organization that's ruling the world, how would they pass down this plan to posterity? How would they continue this ideological chain? It doesn't work. You can see that with Christianity. You can see it with Muslims. You can see it with every certain religion. It changes over time, over generations. Like, there is a change. So it couldn't be consistent. And when you start talking about that, that's more like Adolf Hitler thinking, because World War II, when he started killing the Jews, he got his hands on the book called The Elders of Zion, where it basically outlines how, like, these Hasidic Jews or these Orthodox Jews during the Bolshevik Revolution, what they were planning on doing was like taking over the media, the government, and just like infiltrating and making everything theirs. And that's why he ended up killing them all, because he believed this book, which is, it's crazy to me.
Yeah.
So the other side of that QAnon thing is this COVID vaccination thing. And this is, I'm going to see if you can follow this logical train with me, because it's going to be a rough one. All right. So the belief that the vaccine is going to kill you, right? That why mass genocide is what you hear the most being argued against the vaccine, right? At least on the spectrum of crazy, or at least on the spectrum of extreme. I won't call it crazy. So what, in your opinion, what would the actual purpose be if this elite group of people wants to kill millions of people? Why would they do that?
I assume as a control move. I assume as a mitigation of threat, mitigation of thought.
Okay, so a control move. Well, what are they in control? What do you actually have control of when you're in government, right? Are you in control of buildings, of land? But you're in control of people. Like that's the point, is being in control of people. So how do you become this massive, conglomerate, essentially Cobra, right? You're Cobra. You want more people to do what you want than less, because then you would have a slave class that would be living inside of camps. I wouldn't work for you, motherfucker. You just kill me. If you put me in a camp and you tell me to fucking build you a flat screen TV, suck my ass. I'm not doing shit. But you would want it to maintain the status quo of what we have now, where they just continue gaining wealth and the rest of us work. So that logical train ends there for me. Mm-hmm. But now the only other reason that this would work is if space isn't real. And this is where you go into another Christian belief, is something called the firmament. And are either one of you familiar with the firmament?
Yeah, the shell, basically.
Yes. So,
elaborate.
So the firmament basically is, there's a few different ways you can view this. The firmament basically is like imagine a snow globe, and that's where the stars are embedded into. So space doesn't actually exist. It's this veil that's around Earth, that these are holes in the firmament, and that's where the light's coming through. And on the other side is the waters, quote unquote, the waters, where God let them out when Noah's flood happened. That's when we saw the waters the first time. So in that specific one, space isn't real. But the interesting thing about these Christian views is they start to subsume other views within them. So now what you're seeing is, well, space is real, but the firmament's just further out. It's just further out there. So these other planets exist, but at the end of it, that's the firmament. So there's something consistent with that in science. It's called the Hubble constant, right? So the Hubble constant basically is the distance at which the Hubble telescope can see. So imagine that in a 360 all the way around the X, Y, and Z axis of the Earth. And it's projected as far as the Hubble constant or the Hubble telescope can see. That would create a theoretical border. We don't know what's on the other side of that. Logically, it would make sense that space continues and so on and so forth. But that firmament idea is consistent with flat Earth. So in the flat Earth theory, there is a dome around the Earth. And in that theory, there's a few different trains that you can go down. Like, once again, space isn't real, or our planet is the only one that has a dome and the other planets exist the way that they do because of intelligent design and whatever. So if there is a dome around Earth that tells you something, like in your subconscious, that you are trapped, you are unable to leave. So, and I've asked you this question before, and the question then becomes, is the Earth infinite, like in its dimensions? Is there only a finite amount of space that the Earth exists on? And I would say the answer is yes. Then the next question is, well, how many resources are in this finite amount of space? So then the fear of being trapped, and then the fear of the lack of resources, that's the next reason that you would have a genocidal of murdering of everybody on the planet.
Right.
So they have this cognitive dissonance between this belief of the firmament and climate change isn't real because the propaganda tells me it doesn't happen. Climate change isn't happening, and it's this big pull by the liberal media to get us to get away from oil, and it's evil basically, because then they start painting these people as evil.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make sense to me.
No. Especially in the concept of being that, like, we are the only flat domed existing. At the Hubble constant, it's actually really interesting because the more you learn about that, the more you learn in your childhood that what you were told was factual is actually theory.
Yeah.
So it became like this, like, as you dive more into like astrophysics, you're like, oh fuck, dude, like we know for sure these portions of physics. We know for sure, like, that's how things operate. However, the further we go back in time, the more and more it becomes a belief system, the less it becomes a actual reality. And that's what a lot of the flat earthers talk about, is that your Big Bang theory is a theory. The theory of gravity is a theory. You don't know. You're believing in it. And this comes back to the same argument of like facts don't care about your feelings. Well, like I'll die on the hill of gravity. I'll fight you tooth and nail like gravity's real. You know what I mean? Because it's a fact to me because of my belief systems.
Yeah.
What's interesting, I tangented myself. So the Hubble constant is how far back in time we can see. And I think that's a very hard concept to really, truly wrap your head around, is that it's the light years of things we can see.
Mm-hmm.
So at that edge of darkness that we can tell, we theorize that we are only seeing up into this point of the universe's existence, which is, it's hard to fathom when we say, hey, we just observed a star going supernova. Okay, well, it's 500 million light years away. That shit happened 500 million years ago. That's ridiculous. Yeah, light years ago, right? So it's like, for the concept to be, okay, so this is how far back in time we can see. Everything beyond this, we guess. Like it's the whole dictation of like, we can see other galaxies. Yeah, we can see. I don't know. The documentaries I watch say like this is the observable universe, and then outside of that is more observable universes. I don't know. I'm an idiot. But nevertheless, like, so we can see these. We can see these clusters of existence as far out as we can, and we theorize beyond that time delay of what we're able to observe is even more. I buy that shit way more than I buy like creationism. Personally, it's easier to comprehend.
So even that though, that's creating a theoretical bubble, and what is on the outside of that. And then the next, no matter what theory you're using, the question becomes what created it, because the way that we understand everything about reality is a cause and effect.
Correct.
So, every theological belief system, at least in Zoroastrian or like Western culture, has a causal chain back to the Big Bang, and then it's this one event. So God created everything. That's the first causal chain, and then some other ones have a dual causal chain where it's two things, like where there's a mother God and a father God, and the cosmic egg in like Gnostic traditions. So no matter which way you go, right, that's out into space. Then if you go into the atom and then you start talking about the electron, like what actually compels the electron to do anything, right? What compels the electron? When I heard there's a mathematician that asked that question, I was like, bro, what?
Yeah.
What?
It's deep, bro.
And I was like, fuck. So no matter which way you go, you cannot disprove or prove the existence of God. And I remember in our podcast when me and you were talking, we were talking about living quantum instead of thinking in binary. Yes. So in my mind, both exist. Both are possible. Both are absolutely possible.
Well, so this is kind of the journey that we just talked about prior to this, is that I think both of us went down an atheist train for a while of being like, there's no fucking way, because you're rebelling against everything you knew. You're intentionally saying no to that. And I think we both kind of landed back on an agnostic approach, that it's okay not to know. It's okay to say that maybe there's a chance. Because all of human thought is based in linear process, because everything we know is linear. And you open the book, you read the book, you shut the book is done. You're born, you live, you die. So it must be the same way with how we got here in the first place, is that God said, let there be light. So there was, and then he fucking shit out dinosaurs, and here we go. And then on the other side of like the science train, you're like, everything is expanding. So that implies that there's space to expand into, but that also is the theory that everything started as less than a pinpoint of matter, which I that's the part that I don't understand. That's the shit that I don't get.
Something presupposes nothing presupposes the existence of something.
Correct.
So it's when it was this tiny little thing. Well, what was everything else? Well, there was everything else.
What's the space to expand into? Is that to say that everything is constantly moving further away from whatever the dictation of a center is. So to have a center, you must have a border. And to have a border, there must be something on the outside of that to grow into. I mean, there's too much there. That's why one of my favorite modern theories is like the breathing universe, the idea that all of this expands and contracts. That implies that there's some sort of a pinnacle point, that there's like, okay, we've reached the end of our expanse and now we're retracting. So that implies that there's a force outside of this, like an accordion being moved. And that's fuck, man. Like the further back you go towards the creation, the more easy it is to believe that somebody snapped their fingers. Yeah. It's so much easier to believe that. I know that you and I talked about creationism after I had just finished like a creationism class in college. And the two that really caught my eye is Egypt being, long story short, their god loses his eye. His eye is returned to him. He cries out of joy.
Horus.
Yes. He cries out of joy. Those tears hit the earth. Man is born from pride, happiness, and kindness. This, they theorize, is because where Egypt was formed is like one of the easiest places to live ever. So you have to your south a giant desert that's impassable. The Nile's flood patterns are predictable. And at the time of formation, the ocean wasn't really a main method of travel for long distance. So the ocean was another natural border. So your crops are plantable and you have natural defenses on each side of you. So it's easy to be happy and prosperous and not have to worry about the basic survival needs. Your civilization can grow
your
and thrive.
Human needs are being met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then you have the Sumerians that were in between the two rivers of Greece. Again, don't know their names. Both of those rivers have very unpredictable flood patterns. That area had been occupied and invaded over and over and over again. The Sumerians were just the ones to be able to repel a lot of these attacks. And in their creationism story, their god king slayed a dragon, died during the slaying of that dragon, and his blood, when it dropped to the earth, born of man. So man's born from battle. They didn't even believe in an afterlife, heaven or hell. So the Sumerians as a people pursued immortality from the get-go. That was their whole objective, is how do I fucking live forever? Yeah. Which is funny that we bring up this satanic vampiric bullshit, is that this predates all of that. Like, this is way before that human beings were in this train of thought. And if I'm remembering correctly, the Sumerians were the same people that believed in Nibiru and the Anunnaki aliens and the occupation of our planet and the seeding of our planet by fucking extraterrestrial gods, right?
I think their names were Enlil and Enki. They came down into the ocean.
Right. Yeah. Right. And they were giants, right? So you can Google these Sumerian tablets, if you haven't before, of these people in like respirators holding man. It's very interesting, especially if you believe that art is derived from the scene and it can be exaggerated. Because like if you look at Far East art or even medieval Europe art of dragons, like that's an easy concept for me to wrap my head around. It's like, okay, snakes suck. Snakes suck. What if it could fly? A flying snake, that fucking blows. And then the most uncontrollable element that we know of, because all we have is fucking buckets, is fire. So what if that fucking thing breathed fire, bro? Like, what if it, you know what I mean? Like, it could fly and burn things. That makes sense to me, how you got to that place of like, this is an epitome of fear, right? Because it's everything that's unpredictable. Everything. That makes sense to me. People drawing dudes in respirators. I mean, for all we know, that was their best way of drawing piercings. Like the way that they would connect rings with chains and whatnot. And that's what it looks like to us, because in our modern perception, we're like, oh, that looks like a fucking gas mask, bro. Like that could have been just piercings and other things.
Because
like
your values, the value that you're putting into some information is based on your experience.
Correct. Yeah. And so like one of the things when I was a young man, 15 or so, that like blew me away is that like scarabs on Egypt hieroglyphics. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they would put wings on them, right? That might have been their only way to convey something that flies, something that's above, because they were drawing in 2D. If you look at any of the artwork from Western Europe or even, the Middle East at that time, when they would depict battles, everyone's standing on top of each other. There wasn't a lot of depth. Maybe it was just the art at the time, they didn't understand how to draw depth. or it was just an impossibility with how they were going about it. So you had battle formations of a dude's feet on top of the other guy's head. Now we know these fuckers weren't standing on each other's heads.
Yeah.
Like, we know that. We know that they were in formations. We know that they were fighting as units. We know these things. So we're able to see that and be like, oh, thank you. How do you depict something flying? So when you're drawing scarabs or angels or any of these items that you can dictate, right? You throw wings on it, because the only frame of reference of anything that's airborne is a bird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes enough sense. So it's curious to see how that unfolds through history with these conversations of creationism and artwork depicting that, because that's really all we have to baseline our perception of creationism is the artwork from that time. And the past word, I mean, God only knows how fucking many times these books have been rewritten, reread, reintegrated into something, right?
Well, the church, I mean, the Bible specifically, they voted on books. It was called the Council of Nicaea, where they picked what books were going to be in the Bible. And the books that they left out were called the Gnostic books. They're now colloquially known as the Gnostic books of the Bible.
Right.
And they talk about everything that you were talking about in the Sumerian text, like especially in the Book of Enoch. That entire show, Ancient Aliens, is based off of the Book of Enoch. And so when you're talking about this art stuff and like the values and symbolism is what you're actually talking about. There was something with this QAnon movement that started really early on with Alex Jones, and it was what is it called? The Bohemian Grove in California, where like Bush and the Skull and Bones, and they're worshiping this giant owl figure. So when Alex Jones presents this information to people, he calls this deity or this thing that they're worshiping, he calls it Murdoch?
No, fuck, dude, it's something with an M, definitely.
I think it's Murdoch.
I don't. That doesn't sound right to me.
Moloch. That's it.
Moloch. Yeah.
There we go. So he calls it Moloch, and Moloch is actually a bull. It's not an owl. Moloch is a bull deity. So just off of that, he's talking about the wrong thing. It's the golden calf in that story when what's his name comes down from the mountain, Moses or whatever his name was. That's Moloch, and then they used to throw children into it to like get the rains to come or whatever. What that deity is most likely is Minerva, which is Athena's owl. And when you're talking about Minerva, you're talking about wisdom. And so Christians have always had an issue with pagans. And there was this huge movement through the United Kingdom to like kill all these pagans. And the pagan belief system was essentially that women were gods, and that you would pray to these symbols and you would receive something. So now that we're in modern times and we were talking about attention as a commodity, if I put my intent onto something, it's more likely that that's going to happen for me because I'm putting that out, like I'm making a conscious effort to do said thing. So when these people are worshiping this owl, Minerva is synonymous with wisdom. That's what she represents. So these people are worshiping wisdom and they're asking for wisdom. And that makes sense to me. Like that, that makes more sense to me.
So I think it's fair to clarify also that like paganism is everything but mainstream religion. So, for instance, as you go further back into the occupation of Gaul or the Britannic Islands, after Rome as an entity became Christian, So
you're talking about Hellenistic pagans, specifically when you're talking about Rome.
Yes. So we can focus more on like the northwestern side of Europe paganism, right? So when they were trying to convert these people, and especially on the Britannic Isles, they started adopting a lot of their religious beliefs into the holiday system of Christianity to make it easier. So like Christmas, for instance, makes no fucking sense because it's Wiccan in nature. It was the worship of the natural world. The idea that the pagans that they did appeal to, I'm not sure which tribe in general, but they would light candles and hang them from trees and decorate trees to say thank you to these forest entities, whatever that is. What the fuck does that have to do with God in the Christian sense? It has nothing to do with it, but it's been subscribed to the people for so long that it's now a norm. Especially with Santa Claus, one of the interesting theories I heard is that there's a mushroom that grows that naturally looks like his hat. It's the red and white capped mushroom, and reindeer are known to eat this mushroom. There's also stories of like northwestern Europe, so the Scandinavian area, that during harsh winters, the only way to access your neighbor's home was through the chimney. To be able to check on them or to leave your own house was to go through your fucking chimney because your doors and windows were snowed in.
That's crazy.
So yeah, a lot of Christian adaptation was in the purpose of conversion. Because you see
that nowadays too.
Yeah,
like you see that nowadays with. So when we were growing up, homosexuality was a sin.
Correct.
And then now all of a sudden there's Christians that are saying, oh no, you can be gay and it's okay. It's like,
Correct.
Wait, 10 years ago you wouldn't have said that.
Yeah, you weren't cool with this at all, bro. Like, we're consistently changing the fucking rule set. We're moving the goalpost to achieve this enlightenment or afterlife that is what's beneficial.
So then my question becomes, what are you holding on to? Like,
correct.
what do you actually hold on to then? And that's scary for a lot of people when they're trying to leave.
If every belief is malleable, how do we know your heaven isn't malleable? How do we know, why is this so hard fought? What's going on? The further back you go with religion and the whole idea of monotheism is, I think it's baselined in the idea that polytheism has to be impossible to control. Impossible, right? Because you have a whole sector of people that worship Saturn, and they have the temple of Saturn, and they go to Saturn, and they love Saturn. And if they're like, hey, we want to pay some homage to Mars here, everyone at Saturn is like, go fuck yourself, dude. Like, Saturn's the man, bro. It has to be impossible to dictate law and regulation to these people because Saturn and their oracle of Saturn is saying, hey, we super need to invade somebody right now, right? Or whatever the case is. And then the Mars temple is saying the opposite. They're like, crop yield will be good this year. Whatever the case is, it has to be impossible to dictate that because the natural course of action, if you're in a small village and you have a influential person that's like, hey, Mercury is the man, he's the god of this village, whatever. How do you dictate to that village now?
Yeah. Something interesting happened in Egypt, and I can't remember which pharaoh took over, but Egypt's religion morphed from monotheistic to poly to mono again. So it went from Ra being everything or Amun being everything. Then it went to all of these different deities and like Bastet, Sobek, what is another one? I can't remember his name. Horus is one, but there's like some more lesser deities because Horus is tied directly to the divine trinity, which would be Isis, Horus, and Osiris. Yeah. And then Set's tied to Horus, and then you have Anubis, but that's death. So these minor deities had these like, essentially they had priests. And if you wanted your crops to grow, you had to go to Sobek.
Correct.
And you had to pay homage. But then if you wanted something else, like your farm animals to be good, you had to go to Hathor and pray to her. So then this pharaoh came and was like, nah, fuck all that. We're going to have Ra, and this is who you give your attention to. And then there's an interesting intersection here with like mental health, and what Ra symbolizes is your eye. And it's the connection between the visual world and the metaphysical world, or your inside of your mind. So even back then they were trying to tell people like what you pay attention to is what you fucking get. And that's where you get this law of attraction and new spirituality.
Manifestation, all those types of things. And I think it should be kind of important to mention, I didn't bring it up when I originally brought up Egypt, is that when the Egyptians would die, their passage into their afterlife was that your heart would be weighed against a feather by the alligator-faced creature.
It's Anubis.
Right. So he would take your heart and
he had
put it on a
face
scale.
of a jackal.
So there was someone with an alligator too that was like I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm bad with the names. If your heart was heavier than the feather, then you were damned away from the happy life. And so this just goes to show, like, the creationism and the territory that they lived in was so nice to them that they were able to say, if you're not a good person to this level, this is our level of good, you're damned. So that goes to show with Christianity. Christianity's born of blood. I mean, the whole idea, if you take the original Christianity, which we can baseline in Catholicism, I think is pretty fair, right?
Yeah, I said that in the other podcast.
Yeah, so that's pretty fair, right? So they believe that you're born fucked. You're born fucked. That's why you have to be baptized immediately, as soon as possible. Wash the original sin from yourself because your God bled for you, and how dare you not do that? So a lot of times they believe that these children, when they're taken, like if a baby passes away, that baby doesn't return to heaven. It returns to a purgatorious state. I'm fairly positive, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you're damned at birth due to the fact that more than likely Christianity was some form of a rebellion against polytheism in the Middle East. More than likely, right?
It was in Rome. I actually saw the catacombs in Rome because they wouldn't allow them to bury their dead, so they had to like go into like underground. There's some crazy There's a crazy church in Rome where the entire church is made out of bones.
See, that's
like
fucked.
Human bones.
That's fucked.
It's Christian.
Yeah, that's like real fucking dark, bro, right? So if we fast forward, we're gonna jump, a couple thousand years in the future or whatever. Mormons, right? So Mormons, when they were forming in America, they were being hunted in a lot of the states, dude, as a cult. They were deemed like sinister. So that's how Mormons ended up on the west coast of the United States. They fled to Salt Lake, Mm-hmm. So that's why in Southwest states in particular, you have this huge Mormon presence, and they are a very interesting religion to me. And I don't know how everyone's okay with it today in such a mindset, especially since the Mormon church just came out and they're like, hey, so for a long time, it was like no external substances into your body that are bad for you. No soda, no coffee, no alcohol, no nothing, right? No cigarettes. Well, now Mormons can drink Pepsi because the Mormons bought the Pepsi factory.
Oh, wow. So
they came out officially and were like, no, you can super drink Pepsi. What? Like, how did not, like, any of them raise their hand and they're like, oh, what, dude? Yeah. Like, now this is okay? But they also vote in their cardinals and their overlord or whatever the fuck he is, the equivalent of a pope. Like, it's all a voting process. It's fucking strange, dude. I think the Catholics do the same thing, do they not?
They do vote. Go ahead.
I think it's cardinals that vote in the Pope, right? It's not necessarily like people of the church.
Right.
I could be wrong.
There's some sort of council of spiritual higher boys. Exactly. And they fucking choose someone to sit in the glass ball.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be us as like followers of that faith.
Right.
You know, it'd be leaders of that faith who then pick one of themselves.
I don't know how in 2021 we look at guys in wizard robes, and this goes for the American justice system too, by the way, that like you look to guys in wizard robes that cast judgment and doctrine and edicts over lands. Like if you take it away from religion and look at a judge, the fucker puts on a wizard robe, bro, and it says guilty or not guilty after just hearing some facts from both sides. Like that's a strange system for a modern man. Or it should be, right? We should be able to look at that and be like, what's up with the get-up? What are we doing?
The costume.
Uh-huh. The original intent was to hide your wealth. That was the original intent of that. Was that if you were elected as the justice of the peace of some community, you didn't want that person to know, like if you had nice clothes, okay, so you're one of the wealthy. If you weren't, you could hide that under the robe.
Yeah, it was to show like a neutral status.
Correct. It doesn't do that today. Yeah, it doesn't do that as much today, right? Because we can see through a lot of things with global communication. A man is a lot better off on like the baseline of knowledge, or at least the accessibility of knowledge, than they were 20 years ago.
Very true. Very true. But there's like this interesting thing that we're talking about right now, like in the background in my head. And I want to be very clear that we're not downplaying any of these religious beliefs. Like, it's not, I'm not up here, I'm not trying to Christian bash, but there's some certain beliefs, and I'm going to keep going back to this snake analogy where the snake is wrapped around the knife, and as it constricts, it ends up killing itself, but it constricts more because it's being hurt. So there's some of these things that people are holding on to that they need to let go. And there was this interesting thing that happened when, in the 80s, I think it was, or the early 90s, when the Catholic Church all across the East Coast were having preachers and popes or whatever, or pastors, whatever they're called in the Catholic faith, where they were molesting children. They were literally raping the altar boys, and it was predominantly boys that they were molesting. So at that time, the church came out with some doctrine that it was called like How to Hide the Truth, or something like that within the church. It was a document that was like passed around within the church. And what they would do is they would just move these pastors to a different parish so that nothing ever really came of this case. So around that same time, we talked about this earlier, and there was this repression of homosexuality, very specifically. So for me, this goes back to these basic human needs and this subjective experience of every human. And it's like, why are they molesting boys specifically? And me and you have talked about this, and it's like, what part of yourself or your subconscious is coming out right now? Is it the childhood you? Mm-hmm. Is this the adult you? And for me, what makes sense is that these men were repressing their inner nature of being homosexual. And then when they were coming out and these little boys came around and they were molesting them, it was because it was their inner child trying to come out and like experience itself. And then because at the time you were like, I'm just going to pray the gay away. And we know for a fact that doesn't fucking work.
Correct.
And then now the church has finally accepted the fact that you can be homosexual. And
not be a piece of shit. Yeah, it doesn't mean you're evil, right? It goes back to the fucking conversation of that the goalpost has been consistently moved. But I think you're spot on in that analysis. I think it's that many times in problems you're dealing with past versions of yourself, and it makes a lot of sense that a child molester, or in this specific case, a priest or a pastor against a young altar boy, that the logical train makes a lot of sense. That it's at my age, when I was 8 years old, I was attracted to young boys. Yet I was told that this is all a choice. I don't have to be that way. I can push those thoughts to the dark ends. And
there's only so much the darkness can hold.
Yes, dude. There's a finite amount of space that you can put a jar on a shelf. Dude, and most of us learn that in our adult life, especially if you were raised in the environment that says men don't have emotions. Men don't you don't feel shit. You don't cry. You're stoic, bro. Yeah. But you just repress all that. Most of us in today's age that are around the age of 30 repress so many emotions that we jarred them shits up. And now most of us have ended up in some sort of therapy realm. Because we're like, I don't know how to process basic human emotions. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to fucking articulate my feelings at all. And that leads to the confusion of so many things, that curiosity becomes drive. Anger becomes a sexual frustration, right?
Well, when you're working with those schemas, curiosity becomes the devil.
Correct. Yes.
Curiosity,
because you're not allowed to have it. You're not allowed. So you've been prevented your entire life, if we can narrow the focus back to where we were. So you've been told your entire life that it is evil to be attracted to the same sex. Evil, sinister, cannot do that. That is a terrible no-no. Well, now you're in the position of what a community would deem as the ultimate good. You are the man that listens to everyone's sins. You are the one that cleanses them. You're the one that baptizes babies. You're the one that gives a shit at that level, right? And you are the people's direct line of communication to their deity.
Yeah.
At some point, I wonder if these individuals were able to be like, to rationalize it in their head, because I doubt it was this uncontrollable knee-jerk instance, right? Yeah. This was probably something that was built up to over time. Yeah. With a lot of self-convincing, a lot of that type of stuff, right? So confessions, you sit in a booth with some guy and you're like, hey, I super cheated on my wife. And he's like, awesome. God forgives you.
It wouldn't be some guy. It's the father of that.
Right. It's the dude, right? Yeah. The dude that's diddling kids, right? So at some point, does he believe that he can then forgive himself if he You know what I mean? Like, is that a workup portion of it? Maybe in some cases, sure.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at a human being that this has occurred over and over and over again. Some of them might have been by force, some by grooming, some by whatever.
So that goes, cause you hear this on Facebook all the time, and I use Facebook as like a thermometer for like basic human intelligence or like what people believe, I guess. And the consensus I hear a lot is kill all child molesters.
Right.
And I think that's the most ignorant statement I can ever understand, because if you take that, if you understood what makes a child molester, right, in the parameters of normal, right, you have the extreme cases, sure. Right, those are like 100 maybe, but the mass majority, like 90%, have been molested when they were kids. So you have victims that grow up to be perpetrators. So then you kill all the perpetrators. Let's say we kill all the perpetrators. The next logical conclusion is we have to kill all the victims. You have to kill all the children, and then you can wipe out the whole thing. And nobody is willing to do that. Nobody wants to do that. That's a dumb idea. So in my head, it makes more sense. Like, hey, they committed this crime. Let's study them and figure out what logical train that they took and where we could have. And I guess the term would be inoculate, like you used before, where you would essentially put in a vaccine, which would be therapy of some kind. We could develop it through this study to these children when they're younger, and then see if it works. Right. And then these people can, you know what I'm saying? They can be watched and helped. And because I could only fucking imagine, right? I grew up in that realm of like, you're not allowed to talk about your feelings. Well, imagine being molested and then feeling like you can't talk about your feelings, and you live in this echo chamber where the person that was supposed to provide you security has just violated that. So now your human, your understanding of morality has been fucking warped to a point that it's almost broken. So then when you have people like this conversation that I had on Facebook, they would call the people who are molesting children evil, right? Like it's this entity over here and it's controlling them and it's the devil and there's no explanation. That's just what it is. There's no rationale for what happened. But when you sit down and you actually piece it apart, like make a bifurcation between this thing and that thing, it's like, well, fuck. These people are victims. And like it sucks. Like you still have to punish them. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't just let these motherfuckers walk the street after that. But it's like, where's the evil? Show me the evil. I see a little kid who was molested and grew up with no help.
Correct.
And then you can say that for pretty much most violent crimes. They were beat as children, right? I remember one time, right? I was in a conversation and I asked a dude. I asked the dude, I said, what do you do with a dog that's been beat its entire life and you go to feed it and it bites you? Do you beat it more or do you just try again and put a glove on? He's like, no, you fucking grab it by the neck and you pin it on the ground and you fucking show it who's boss. I was like, what? Yeah, that's your logical, that's what you think is right. And I could only imagine what you would do to a child who talks back to you. I could only imagine.
Right?
Because that's a dog. Like I think we can all objectively agree that dogs are the greatest thing that God ever gave the earth. They love you indiscriminately. You could be the biggest piece of shit on earth. A dog would love Hitler, bro. Yes. And you're going to beat it because it's been beat its whole life and it doesn't know how to interact with you. You have to show it love and teach it love. So these kids grow up in this reality of like beating me is okay. So now I'm associating pain with my behavior. So pain is my only way to learn, and it's my only source of expression either. Correct. And then now I grow up into an adult and we're questioning and we're wondering why people are beating the shit out of each other in the street or murder or riots. Like we raised these kids this way. What the fuck did you expect? Correct. Yeah. So you have, it's majority. So I think it's fair to say that the majority of action is learned behavior. Agreed. In some, or at least reaction is learned behavior, right? So I see this shit daily being in law enforcement, man, with people hitting their spouse or hitting their neighbor, or they deal with their problems exactly how they were dealt with them when they were that problem. Whatever that was, because it fixed it for them in some degree. I know that in my household growing up, everything was always swept under the fucking rug, dude. Everything. So if there was an issue that arose
at night, right? Everyone would kind of bicker a little bit, whatever that issue was. We can blow it out or diminish it. Nevertheless, everyone would be like, we'll address this tomorrow.
And it never got
Tomorrow never the fuck came, dude. So now I noticed in my adult life through therapy that I overly go the opposite direction. A problem presents itself and I'm like, no, this gets solved right the fuck now, or else it'll never get fixed, right? Yep. Like this will never get solved if I don't fucking throw a knee at it right now.
And the military didn't help that.
Not at all, because in the military, that's the entire crux of it. Is you see something wrong, spot fix instantly. Hey, that's fucked up. Don't ever do that again, right? And then in law enforcement, it reinforced it even further, dude, that it's like, oh, look, a civil crime. The guy was speeding. Well, I better fucking pull him over. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like it's this force-fed idea that it's like, if there's an issue that's been presented, fix it now. And I think most human beings, at least in today's age, have that same mentality. Fix it now. But they're fixing it with how they got fixed as a kid, whatever that was. So, I know, for instance, in the community that I live in, a lot of it is damaging your surroundings. So wife pisses you off, and you just start breaking everything. Like you throw.
I'm not hitting her.
Yeah, well, it's my shit. I'm breaking my shit. It's like, well, okay, well, in the state of Arizona, that's still criminal damage, bitch. Like you're going to jail. Like that's what's happening. You're going to be held accountable for this action.
It's domestic violence. You're creating an environment that's not conducive to peace, basically.
Yes, and our state in particular takes DVs super seriously, bro. Like it's almost like in the doctrine of our law that somebody's getting hooked.
Yeah,
someone's going to the metal box, and you can't cite and release these people unless the conditions are impossible to put them in a jail cell. Be it medical conditions, they have nowhere else to go, whatever the case is, right? But it's almost doctrine in Arizona that somebody has to go to jail, which is insane, bro. Insane. Because sometimes it's just an argument. Sometimes it's a very passionate argument where you say, fuck you, and she says, fuck you too, and your neighbors call the cops. Well, with them calling, it's now disorderly conduct. Mm-hmm. They've been the victim of the crime too, because their peace was disturbed. It's fuck, man. So my purpose of bringing that up is that at some point, when was this taught? So we even see it in like gaming culture, right? Mm-hmm. Dudes would break their TVs or their controllers when they lose. Where the fuck did that come from? Where was that baseline? Because that seems to be the American condition in our age bracket right now. Is that you snap
lack of emotional intelligence,
right? Right. So you, at some point, what I equate it to is at some point in your childhood, so sub 12 years old, you were not able to express a single bit of frustration because either you were bound in school to shut the fuck up and deal with whatever just happened, or your parents were always like, no, you're not going to have a temper tantrum. You're going to your room, or whatever the case is.
Or your dad tells you, I'll give you something to be upset about.
Correct. And then hit you with a stick, right? So it's like, thanks, Dad. Like, that's great. So
I'm stuck with all these feelings I don't know what to do with.
Yeah,
and
I'm just frustrated.
I'm going to put them over here in this bottle, and I'm going to ignore them like you do.
And Call of Duty pulls that bottle out, and I smash my keyboard on my desk, right? Because it's like, that's what the fuck, man. So a lot of our domestic violences that I've dealt with in this area, at least, are baselined in somebody makes a snide ass remark, and I start breaking shit. It's very curious to see that firsthand, especially when you're like driving that person to jail. Like you're like, all right, I'm gonna put you in a metal box for the night. What happened? What led you to that point? So a lot of I get very curious with people. I want to dig further. Like, how did we get here? That's the question I always ask when I first get to the jail. How did we get to this moment, man? I read them, their Miranda rights, whatever. Just talk to me. How did we get here? And it's about a 50-50 split of people being like, I super overreacted, and then other people, especially when they're intoxicated, are like, go fuck yourself. I hate you. You're the problem.
Yeah,
this is so funny, dude. Like, So accountability is the issue, yet your actions, I know deep down inside, you're like, I shouldn't have done that. maybe I shouldn't have thrown the plate at the kid. You know what I mean?
Do you think that they can have that type of an internal monologue? Because I don't know if everybody has that.
No, I think the majority of people do not. But I think at some level, you realize what you did is wrong. I've never met someone who can perform an action that's inherently wrong for the situation at hand. Be it, we'll keep the example of I took my dinner plate and threw it against the wall. I know that most people, I would say the majority of people, know what they just did. Not the right choice. Not inherently the wrong choice.
They have an internal stimulus that they're not presenting externally to us.
But they don't want to be held accountable for that action. Accountability is also the enemy. Accountability means that I have to pay my dues.
See, I don't know if I agree right here. I'm gonna push back a little bit, because I think what ends up happening for a lot of these people is they rationalize their own behavior and they tell themselves that they're doing okay, and they never they never go down into that subconscious. So I guess I do agree that subconsciously there is some level of morality within every human. However, I don't know if everybody can access said morality, because the way that we've been taught to push away our emotions, and it's this thing over here that's causing my behavior. Right. It's that divine command theory again. Something outside of me is controlling me, and if you hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have done what I did.
Correct. So I would say the mass majority of Americans, I would say the majority of the standard living American, which is you're born in a home that's somewhat capable, you go to a public school, and so on. In none of those environments is it okay to break shit. And in all of those environments, you'll be held accountable on that. So even if it isn't a morality question, it's a habitual question of saying, I know that what I just did would be frowned upon by the vast majority of people that I've dealt with in my life.
Okay.
However, most of the people that I have that say like, fuck you, like you're the problem, they can spin it in their head that you made me do it. It wasn't me. Yes, I broke the plate, or yes, I punched him in the face, but he made me do it with his stupid ass remark. And they can justify that. Like that's where that conversation for them ends. And now that makes law enforcement the bad guy in that situation, is because how dare you arrest me? You should be arresting them because they fucking made me do it.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
which is childish. Yeah. That's toddler. That's the level.
Absolutely, it is, because it's inherently believing that I have no control over my reaction. I have no control. You dictate me. So I'm at the will of my surroundings at any given time.
Yeah.
Fuck living like that, dude. People, usually, at least in my community, are believers that everything is already pre-written. Your life already exists. Every choice you make was already laid out on a path for you. This is all fate and destiny. I was supposed to get in a car accident because it taught me to wear my seatbelt. Bitch, the MVD taught you that. Like, you were told that a long time ago to put on your goddamn seatbelt, right? But it's the justification of action. And most people will believe in things that justify the way of life that they choose to live.
This is very true, but again, I'm gonna push back, because I'm a firm believer in revelation. Because we were talking about this the other day, about the known unknown, and the unknown unknown, and how do you experience the unknown until it's revealed to you?
Right.
So that's where I would make that distinction, that there is some things that it takes some other thing to teach you.
So for the most part, human beings are bred by catalyst. I think we can pretty much agree on that. That like your courses of action or the lessons you're taught are by catalyst. You either observe somebody make a mistake or make a good choice, and you're like, hey, I'm gonna fucking either do that or not do that, right? Or it happens to you directly, and you're like, okay, now I get it. So it's cataclysmic events, and that can obviously be a lesser word. That's just the only thing that comes to mind with this, is that you have these. The pendulum hits noon every now and then, and it's able to make that decision path occur. The counter argument to that, of course, is the fate argument, that all of this is already made up. I am literally just walking my path, which I refuse to have personally. It's not wrong to believe like that, but that's taking all freedom of choice away from you. That's dictating that every action you've ever made or will ever make is predisposed.
Well, so that's so we were talking about this journey away from Christianity or whatever. There's something called like being a recovering Catholic, and most people who are recovering Catholics either A, go straight atheist, or B, become, it's called like Calvinistic Christians. And when you're talking about predetermination, that's what you're talking about, is Calvinistic Christians. And there's another way to look at this predetermination thing, and it's like, yes, everything is preset, because if I can view the past, present, and future as one thing, then things already are. Now the question then becomes, when I'm living my life, do I actually have a choice to make something change?
Correct.
So I think you don't have a problem with predetermination as a whole. You have a problem with the idea that you can't change. And evolution exists. Evolution exists. So I can become a different person. I can be better. I can, like, my lot in life isn't set in stone. Like, I don't have to be a piece of shit my whole life. I can be better. I can be better. My
main issue with it, for a personal thing, is that I don't like it because most people use it as a scapegoat.
Oh yeah.
When they see this way. Yeah.
I'm a cucumber, so I act this way, or whatever zodiac sign. Yeah,
they're the same people that are like, no, I'm a bitch, and they use that as a personality trait. It's like, whoa, bro, like, so you're just a douchebag? Like, that's your personality trait? That's really what you've chosen to be? Like, that's it? You're just a dick to people for the sake of it?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Mm-hmm. I don't like I don't like excuse making. I don't like people that can make everything not their fault. Everything, no, it was the way it was meant to be. Like, are you sure, bro? Like,
you like accountability.
Someone got hurt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big fan of it. Yeah.
I think me and you have a common thread here, because I take personal issue when Jocko says things like, extreme accountability and responsibility, that everything is your fault. Yes. Not everything in life is my fault, right?
So did you read those books, by the way?
Which
like
ones?
Extreme Ownership or any of those, or Beyond Extreme? So I did. They're very interesting in concept. What I hated about it is that after those books came out, Jocko then said, well, I didn't mean it as like everything. It's a good idea for people to baseline their thought in, but it doesn't have to be absolute. It's like, if you read Extreme Ownership, it is absolute. Like, it's your fucking fault, bitch. Like, you fix it. So
yeah. And I take personal issue with that, because in the military, we already have that baseline. So when I hear soldiers quote Jocko to me, I'm like, bro, you don't need Jocko. You need Alan Watts. Like, you need somebody to teach you how to be peaceful again. You already are a killer. You got this hardline fucking structure in your life. You need to now learn how to be peaceful. And when you were talking earlier about like your life and priorities and time, one of my biggest issues when I got out was like being present with my children and not thinking that everything was death and destruction at all times. Like, my son pours orange juice on me and I'm ready to fucking snap. Yes. Like, because I can see into the future where this one behavior then leads to this behavior, then leads to this behavior, then leads to this. And if I don't stop it now, it's going to become this problem. And then I'm like, well, my wife kind of got me to chill out, and so did therapy. But it's like, this one moment is not going to be that catalyst. It doesn't have to be. And it's my reaction to this thing. So that specific event, my wife ended up telling me, because I asked her if I should freak out, and she was like, no, he's sick. He's getting sick right now. And I was like, all right, I'll trust you, whatever. And then the next day, sick as fuck. Right. So he was having a hard time expressing himself, and he like just wanted my attention. And I can remember being a kid and having a hard time expressing these things that I'm fucking feeling, and then it comes out, I'm being a turd. You know what I mean? And I was like, I didn't mean to be a turd. I just wanted you to fucking give me a hug or whatever. Yeah, right. So it goes back to like this repression and this emotional intelligence. But when you constantly hear that everything's your fault and this, that, and the other, it's essentially saying that I can control other people, and that's not fucking possible. I'm only in control of two things, and that's my actions and my reactions. Whatever the fuck you do ain't got shit to do with me.
Right.
It ain't got shit to do with me.
Well, and so this has been a recent concept. So this weekend was kind of funny when I was over there helping my buddy, right? His family is like super into like the Wiccan shit. So like I had like a tarot card reading, all stuff that I'm like not really subscribed to, but I find interesting in the moment. And there was a reason I was bringing that up. So one of the things that a lot of these people in the house kept saying that I thought was profound in its own sense was that it's not my job to fix you. It's not my job to be anything but just a safe space. You're on your path. You do what you need to do. And that's something that I really have never embraced in my personal life. And what I realized over that weekend was it was like, oh, fuck, dude. Like I spend a lot of time being like, no, bitch, you're wrong. You know what I mean? Like, but there's no place for that with most things, because if you wanted my advice, you would fucking ask direct for it.
Yep.
You don't need it. You don't want
it. There's a saying, you can only affect what comes to you directly.
Correct. So I'm going to try for a couple weeks here to just live and let live to like the nth degree. Like obviously in my professional setting, I can't do that. Like if I watch a dude like throwing knees into someone at Circle K, I can't be like, not mine to fix and drive away. But with friends and people I know.
But even then, it's not yours to fix. You're not fixing the situation.
No, you're accountability.
You're separating it to a point. That's not fixing it, because that dude still has the problem, and whoever the other person is still has that problem.
Yeah, they still have the bruises, right? So I tell everyone when they're getting arrested, it's one of my main slogans if they're coherent, is that my job is the accountability of your actions. If you're a good person, I'll hold you to it. If you fuck up today, I'm holding you to it. That's it. It's not personal. I don't care about you. I don't know you. But I'm here to help who needed help. If you were the one that needed it, I'm here. If you're not, I got you too. Yeah. And it's hard because for law enforcement, it's not personal, right? It's not a personal endeavor. When I put handcuffs on somebody, it doesn't affect me. Yeah. It sucks in some cases, but for the most part, not personal. For them, it's the most personal day of their fucking life. Especially if it's their first time getting arrested. That is as personal as it gets. You're like, oh my God, bro, this is a life-changing experience. This sucks. I'm going into a metal box with people that, you know, you get put in like a cell or a pod, and you're just existing with a bunch of people that are in your same shoes, or you might have the regulars, the frequent flyers in there that are like, oh, don't worry, bro, you'll fucking get out tomorrow morning, not an issue, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. But regardless, I think I just told you this the last time we talked. Like most people have an interaction with law enforcement like twice a year. Yeah. And one of those is like you see him at a gas station. You're like, oh, it's a fucking cop. Like, you know what I mean? And he goes to his truck and he turns back on the podcast or whatever. He's not paying attention to anything. The other incident might be you getting pulled over. So this is your only chance as an officer. And what I tell new guys, your only chance to make a positive impact with that person's life. The only chance you're going to get for 360 plus days for you to be cordial, professional, courteous, and kind. Don't be a fucking dick. Like there's no place for it, because then that person's going to go and blast on Facebook and recreate the cyclical nature of fucking all law enforcement are Nazis. And here we go. Yep. Over and over and over again. The more people you can impact professionally and kindly, the better chance you have of not getting fucking shot randomly.
That's the same concept that we had in Iraq. It was winning the hearts and minds. Like if I go into a house and I start beating, I'm doing a raid, right? Right. And I go into the house and I just start slamming their TV on the ground and fucking kicking over their bookshelf just because I want to, because I can. Right. What did I just do to those people? Right. I just made an enemy.
Hate you. Right. It's like the same concept of like the convoy rolls by and they fucking throw a piss bottle at the kid because he's been throwing rocks at the truck. Yeah. So you fucking piss in a Gatorade bottle and you beam him upside the head with it. Okay. Yeah. That like that's not okay, right? Because now that kid has that concept of the American military, not that truck, not that soldier. Yeah. The American military will literally piss on you. Because
the moment you put on a uniform, that's what it is. When people, so that's the difference between authority and the subject of authority, or the subordinate. Is like if I'm out of the military and I'm looking at the military, I see it as a whole. I don't see it for what it is. I just see it as a whole. And then like these civilians that are viewing the police see it as a whole. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, the best thing that we can do in our country, for instance, is that the police have a very consistent way of interacting with civilians, because the civilian is going to be volatile. The civilian, you can't pinpoint his behavior. You can't say whether or not he's going to interact in a certain way, but the cop can control his reactions to this individual. And it's supposed to be, the way I picture it is like you are the structure in that environment, and you don't allow the situation to go too high or too low. You keep it at this level, and then that's what it is. Then if they start to raise their, whatever it is, there's ways to mitigate that, number one.
Sure.
Number two, if it gets to a point where you have to suppress them, you can do that, and it doesn't always have to be physically. It can be with your presence. You can just stand up a little bit straighter and talk a little bit sterner. But then on that same coin, like when a dude jumps out of a car with a firearm, you have to turn on. Right. You have to turn on and be like, all right, he made this fucking choice, and this is what I have to do now.
Correct.
Right? Cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect.
So what you have, though, unfortunately, is a lot of people that become so complacent in a law enforcement sense that they are, from a direct example, right, is that cops that show up to a traffic stop or a call for service and are immediately out of the gate of cunt. Immediately, because they don't want to be there. Their lunch got spoiled from this call because they were just ordering their food and then the call kicked out. Okay, I can't fucking eat. Now I'm hangry because I can't control my fucking emotions. And I show up on scene and I just blow up on this person that did not deserve it. They don't need you. So one of the things that I try to communicate to new officers in particular is it's like, nobody deserves your bullshit. Stop giving it to them, because you have to be able to divide your brain. Unfortunately, right? You'll go from a critical incident, be it a terrible car accident where a child is maimed or killed, and then go to a noise complaint right after it. So you just go through this process of putting someone in a body bag, or at a minimum, putting them in an ambulance with their collarbone broken and the bridge of their nose destroyed, or whatever the case is. And then the next call for service that you have is that my neighbor's dogs are barking. That person that called that in does not deserve your bullshit from that car accident. Does not deserve it. They have not earned that. They're not even aware of it. So that's the biggest
thing, is that they're not aware of it.
Yes,
most
don't
people
give it
come
to
in to situations assuming that the other person already knows some critical piece of evidence or information that they're holding within them.
Yes.
And it's like, bro, I didn't know that anything about that. And,
right. It's kind of like in relationships when your partner assumes something of you.
I'm guilty. I am guilty of that.
Yeah. How the fuck was I supposed to know? Right? Like, for instance, like if you go to the gym instead of coming home and like watching a movie with them, and they were like, well, I thought you would just come home and be with me. It's like, how the fuck would I know you wanted that? You know what I mean? Like, that's not fair to me. And you're taking something from today and pushing it as it's my fault. Can we talk about that? Like, let's work through that, whatever that is. Or you felt like you deserved my presence more, whatever it is, right? In a law enforcement sense, it's hyperbolic of itself. In that is that you don't deserve their bullshit, but it's your job to take their bullshit. They don't know you. They don't care. They learn your name for 2 seconds. They'll be like deputy whatever or officer whatever. Okay, so you're the guy right now. Tomorrow they don't remember your name.
So I want to push back on what you said about relationships a little bit. So when my wife or whatever, she expects something of me. So a relationship is management of expectations.
Yes.
So we expect our partner to do certain things. And if I don't express it to my partner, how were they supposed to know?
Right.
But then once it's expressed and I don't change my behavior, I am showing them how.
And so this is the predisposition of that. So that's prior to the knowledge that this was expected of me, right?
Yes.
So if it was like, especially in a dating realm with boyfriend, girlfriend, they're pretty fresh relationship, how the fuck was she supposed to know that you wanted to pick her up for dinner?
Yeah.
You didn't say it.
Yeah.
So when she's like, yeah, I'll meet you there at 6, and then you held on to that you're like, I'm the man, I had to pick you up. You know what I mean? Like, how is she supposed to know?
And then
don't put that on her.
In that same sense, so we talked about this, me, Juan, and Sanchez, about dudes fucking a bunch of bitches, right? and you essentially create this image of women and like their hoes and whatever, what have you, but you actually expect the woman that you're with to treat you like she's not a hoe. And then it's this expectation of this woman to be what I want her to be. So what ends up happening a lot of times is people will tell you the truth. They will tell you the truth about themselves. You just don't listen, and you want them to be something else.
I can fix her.
And vice versa, especially in the feminine, right? The feminine is a nurturing energy. So a woman, right, who's in touch with her feminine, or however you want to put that, she wants to fix you. She wants to fix these dudes. That's why you see all these girls that end up with really shitty dudes and whatever. And then when men are starting to like get into this this realm of emotions, and like they're actually getting in touch with their feelings or whatever, they end up doing the same behavior where they're like, oh, well, she said this, but I really, really want her. I know she said she was a hoe. I know she said she was a hoe, but
yeah, I want her.
Yeah, she's not going to do that to me.
Right, I'm special.
Yeah, and then so when she does it, you rationalize why she did it.
Right.
And it's like it becomes okay and a norm until it breaks.
Right.
And then that's when you see these dudes like beating the shit out of her, or you know what I'm saying? And and earlier in that train of that stream of consciousness, if they had a cognition in there that could break that loop, like, yo, this isn't okay. I voiced my expectations. She doesn't want to meet those expectations. That's the end of it for me. Right?
Yes.
And sometimes, and this is going to sound really fucked up, we have to reevaluate what we are expecting of that person. Sometimes it's fucking unreasonable. Like it's it's unreasonable to expect somebody else to know what the fuck I'm thinking. That is an unreasonable expectation.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of men in particular, at least in my experience, more men are in this realm of thought that they want to be the most important thing that's ever happened to that woman.
Yes.
Like, you are the most attractive. You're the best fuck. You are the best. Like, you can fix anything. Like,
no man is allowed to be better than me.
Yeah, exactly. I am the epitome of man. Yeah. Right. I see that more with men than I do with women. Which leads to a very self-destructive cycle in most of these dudes, that she has a male friend that she calls to fix her fridge or whatever, right? Rough example, whatever. That like fucking hurts that guy. Right? Because he's like, I can't fucking do that. I could have done it. Even if he's like, she called a fucking plumber to fix her toilet, and he's like, oh, but why not me? You know? And it's like, well, that guy's a professional and he does this for a living. It's okay. It's okay.
And that to me, that I was having this conversation the other day, that goes back to like this this focus on the material world and this financial world for the masculine. And it's like, there's another world out there. Most of the time, the feminine really just wants you to be there and support her emotions. And that's the hardest thing. And you hit on it earlier, where it's like, I want to fix it now.
Yes.
I don't want to talk about it. I want it to be done and over with, and we come up with a solution, and then we go with the solution, and then we can just be done talking about it.
Right.
And that goes back to our other conversation about the first step is validating the feelings. It's like, all right, I got to take a break. I got to fucking pull myself back into the present moment and be like, all right, and just listen and be like, damn, that sucks, and try to feel it with them. And this is like the hardest part for me, is that I'm pretty empathetic. So like when you're telling me your problem, like I feel it too. And I'm like, fuck, I want to fix this for you because I don't want you to feel like that. I want you to feel better. But it's sometimes, and this is something that you learn through therapy and like cognitive behavioral therapy specifically, is like you have to feel the emotion all the way through to actually learn what the fuck it is, and then for it to change. Once you've observed the entire pattern of it, sometimes it'll actually change its existence completely once it's expressed. And that's the hardest thing to convey to somebody who's never actually felt that.
Right. And I know personally, one of my issues, or not an issue, more or less something just I've been able to identify, is that my empathy is expressed with countering, which is not fair. Right. So if you come to me and you're like, hey, you made me feel like shit because you fucking did whatever. And I'll be like, wow, sorry for making you feel like shit. However, this was my intent. And it's like, it does not work, right? Because in the moment when you tell me you made me feel like shit, I'm like, oh, fuck, dude. Like, that, my bad. But I didn't mean it that way. So it's immediately counteractive. It's immediately unintuitive as a means of communication. And it's something that I'm assuming is from my childhood of communication with my parents. That I'd be like, hey, that wasn't cool. And they're like, well, it had to happen. You know what I mean?
I think that specifically comes from the masculine part of all of us, and like the military specifically, because what is the word? A decision is better than no decision.
Correct.
Right? So it's like, we want to problem solve, because we are on a time schedule, and this is all relative to death. Like, in our world, if we don't make a decision, somebody fucking dies. Right. So we're trained in that modality of thought. And then when we go into these other modalities that don't really involve death, we still have that subconscious programming of like, this is life and death. This is life and death running in the background. And when you like stop for a second, you're like, what does this really matter? Why does it have to be done right now? Like, why does it have to be fixed right this fucking moment? It's like, it doesn't. I just want it to, because I don't want to deal with this, because all men want to achieve this solid state of rest, of like, everything's calm and peaceful. I don't have to do anything.
The castle's safe,
So we talked about this before, about the first, second step and the third step. And that first step is validating those emotions of this girl, of this person that you've hurt, right? So you tell me that I upset you, and my first reaction, what you said, would be to say I'm sorry, and then counter with my reasons why.
Right.
What should happen, and there's a reason for it, is me hearing you out. Like, okay, well, why did this make you feel that way? Or how did this happen, and how did you feel this way? And listening to you all the way through. So when I'm listening to you all the way through, I'm learning a bunch of information that I may not have had before. So I'm thinking that my expression, right, and we talked about this with the Jung's model of the self, like my projection of my personality and the way that you're receiving this information. You're telling me what my projection was. And if my intent, honestly, was not to hurt you, I want to take that in as quickly as possible so that I can change my projection so that it matches my intent. So when I listen to your when I validate your feelings all the way through, it's like, okay, so then I can come back to you and be like, all right, well, this is how it was for me. This is what I meant. This is what I thought this was. And then maybe it's a miscommunication on some trivial shit, or maybe it's a bigger thing that like, this person had some generational trauma built up that like anytime this event happens, it triggers this feeling, and so on and so forth. And then we can grow together, especially in a marriage. Because in my opinion, in a marriage, we're both trying to break generational curses and trying to not program our children with the same generational curses that I had to deal with. Because the only explanation I can come up with for the things that I've had to suffer through is so that I can learn from this suffering so that somebody else doesn't have to deal with it too.
Right.
It's just one person, one aspect of the suffering. If I help one, it'll counterbalance itself out all the way through.
And so that's a pretty uncommon thought process, though, from what I experience, especially when kids call the police on their dad, right? So that happens every now and then dad beat the shit out of me. He hit me a lot. Okay, and then you get there and you're like, why did you hit him so much? And it's like, well, that's what my dad did to me.
Yeah.
And that's a reoccurring thing with most incidents. It doesn't even have to be as critical as that. That's just a hard example, right? So to think of it in the opposite direction isn't as common. Most of the time, if it is common, it's baseline in finances, right? Well, I was raised in a bad environment of money, right? Because we didn't eat much. So that's why I have fat kids, is because I just want abundance of food. But then they still they give them that pro, if you can dictate it as such, and then they give them all the cons as well. Where it's like, well, my dad hit me when I fucking talked back, or my mom threw her shoe at me when I talked back. So if you talk back to me, you're taking a shoe.
Yeah.
Right?
So some of these things are directly linked to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and what you just said about the food. That's like a physiological thing, right? That's like a more of a base one. But then we were talking about the mental ones, like esteem, right? Where I want people to like me, right? And that was like something that I grew up with not receiving. So like that's what I'm seeking. So when you see these people who are like traditionally, or not traditionally, but that are doing all of these attention-seeking behaviors, the only thing that they know to get attention for is negative. So if I do something bad, I will get attention.
Right.
So most of this stuff is attention-seeking behaviors because they didn't receive enough attention, whatever attention it was. And this is the hard part for people to understand, is that it's like the police versus the civilians. Like, you can be one way and their reaction to you is variable. Like, you have no fucking idea. So with your children, it's the same way, because they have their own fucking personalities. They're not just some fucking claymation thing that we're creating. Like, and how they interact with you tells you what you should do next. And it's most of the time, actually, you know what? I'm going to say 100% of the time, when you hit your kid, spank, beat them, whatever, it's because you couldn't figure out any other way to solve that problem. So you resorted to your default, which is violence.
Right. Good point. When you bring up like how you really don't know how the public will react to things. Prior, we talked about kind of like officers diffusing situations and whatnot. I have resolved more issues by literally just yelling "shut the fuck up" to somebody. Like, that resolves a lot of things, man. Like the whole concept, like, stand up a little straighter, get more of a presence involved. Shut the fuck up also helps a lot. With that, though, I've had visceral reactions to that, too, that it's resulted in having to go hands-on with these guys. So there's really no dictating how anyone's going to react to a certain concept. So in the realm of children, I really don't have a frame of reference. I don't have kids. I haven't been around a lot of children. I really haven't. Most of my life has been invested into adults. So I couldn't even imagine, like, if you have two kids and you spank one of them and he gets it or she gets it, right? She's like, well, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not doing that. Don't like that. And then you spank the other one. He's like, you know what? Fucking bet. You know, he's like, I'll test that. You're going to do it again? Like, okay. Yeah. And you'll never know until those bridges get crossed, right?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's good.
Oh, it's like one of those, like, I see it. So, like, my brother has twins, right? And, like, they're, like, polar opposites of each other when the way they react with shit, right? Like, one of them is considered to have, like, they say anger issues, right? But, like, he just, like, something happens to him, and I see that he just can't control it or whatever. And I look at my brother because, like, he's like, well, how did I solve it, right? He would just spank them, right? Mexican family, kind of, like, traditional or whatever. But then I see, like, my other nephew really didn't get spanked as much because he didn't lash out as a lot, and he takes everything calm, cool, and collected, right? And, like, I've, like, sat down with them because they'll, like, come over and we just have, like, movie time or whatever, right? And I just kind of, like, talk about, like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, why are you feeling that way? And generally he's like, well, I just want, like, to do stuff with, like, my dad or something like that, right? And, like, I tell my brother this kind of shit, but, like, it's like, hey, dude, like, sit down and, like, talk with them about it. Like, generally, like, yeah, it gets back to, like, let's solve that fucking now and shit. But it's just interesting to see that, like, within just two kids that were essentially the exact same age and everything.
Right.
And they're just exactly the opposite, but in the same household.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So my kids are pretty volatile sometimes, but I was the same way as a kid. And I told this story to Sanchez. I'm going to tell it to you. So I told my son this story, right? And I was on a patrol, like, it was in a training environment. It was at night, and we were walking through the mountains because we were prepping to go to Afghanistan. This was in Germany back in the day. And if anybody's ever walked in Nods, you know that if there's a hole, it's black. You can't ever tell what size it is until you put your foot in the black, and you usually try to avoid putting your foot in the black. And the way that the moonlight was, it was to our backs, so this whole area in front of me was black. So I thought it was like just some like high ground, you know what I'm saying? And then it was just going to slope down. Nah, son, it was a cliff. And it was like 15, I think I said 20 feet the last time, but it had to have been like 12 or 15 feet, right? And I just fell straight on my back. I was on point, and I just fell straight on my back, and I fucking, ugh. And then my squad leader at the time was like, you good, bro? I was like, yeah. And then I just Charlie Miked. So I told my son this story, right? So my son I told my son this story. So the other night I was putting him to bed, and he's like punching me in my ribs, like real soft. You know, he's only 6 years old and he's really not trying to hurt me. And I was like, why are you punching me? Like, why are you hitting me? Please stop. And he was like, it's not like it hurts you. I was like, how do you know it doesn't hurt me? And he's like, because you fell off a cliff and it didn't hurt you. This isn't going to hurt you. You know what I'm saying? I was like, fuck, you're right. Like that tracks. Like that 100% tracks. So I was like, God damn it, man. So when they're doing things that I perceive as wrong, the question then becomes, why do I see it as wrong? Like, what is actually wrong about it? And when they're acting crazy or they're running around the house and fucking wild and having a good time or whatever, like, what's wrong with that? It's because I want peace. I want quiet. But children are not that. It goes back to that children should be seen and not heard shit. Mm-hmm. It's like, no. And half the problem is because the children don't feel heard. And they don't feel like they can talk, and they don't feel like anybody even fucking sees them. And I just, in my mind, right, I don't want my children to grow up thinking that dad didn't give a fuck, or dad didn't play with me enough, or dad didn't do this enough. Because my dad was absent, like 100% in prison my whole life, you know, whoop to whoop and yada yada. So like, I never got to experience what it was like to have a father. So I'm here. I don't want my children to fucking be like that. And I'll catch myself like in those moments where I'm like, fuck, man, I just want to, I'm tired. Like, fuck. And then my son will come up. He's like, will you please play with me? And I'm like, about cry and shit. My heart gets pulled on. I was like, yes, I'll play with you. Sure. Yes, absolutely. We'll play right the fuck now. What do you want to do? And it's like, why are you and it's this priorities of like, when you have a kid, they become priority. They didn't consent. There was no consent to be existence.
Dude,
you brought them. Right, you are responsible. You are accountable. Like that's what we should be doing. So then when we're like having these parental issues with like beating the shit, like we should be figuring out the best way to raise kids so that we're all on the same page. Right, we all need to be on the same page and like sharing these experiences. Like, hey, this didn't work for me, but this may work for you, because every kid is different. So like that one piece of information from the lady down the street might actually help you in this moment. You know. And the more connected the kid feels, the less likely they are to grow up and become a violent offender. Like most of those criminals that you see didn't have a normal, what we would call normal childhood. They didn't have a connection to another human being. And if they did, it was their mother, and who was a single mother, and who probably was barely around. So they were raised by the neighbor, they were raised by the street. And then what did the street teach them? So on and so forth.
Yep. So one of the things that I run into with like juvenile problems, it always comes back to the parents not paying attention. Always. Yep. Every single fucking time, dude, they have a shitty parent. It's usually a single parent. Then the kid's going and fucking acting wild. But when you said like the kid becomes priority, I've said forever that when I have a kid, that's it. Like that's where your personality should shift, or your focus, your attention should shift, right? I see so many people in my age bracket, I'm sure you guys do too, that are still trying to be not a parent. They still want to go to the bars or the clubs, or they want to go and fucking smoke all the weed they can and get drunk, do whatever. And then their kid is left to their own devices at the house, right? They put on the babysitter. They give them the phone. Oh, yeah, you're fine. You can play with your tablet tonight. Mommy's going to go get drunk. Daddy's going to go get drunk, whatever that is, right? Or you have them where the kid is like this fucking inconvenience. That's the most frustrating to me, dude, is when someone will you'll ask them if what they're doing or whatever. They're like, well, I want to go to the store, but God, I don't want to fucking load up the car seats and shit. And you're like, bro, what the fuck? Like, that's your son, bro, or that's your daughter. Like, take them with you, bro. Like, be part of them. All this exposure that you're going to give them is probably beneficial. Go and stimulate their brain. Go and let them see people.
And if it's not beneficial, maybe you shouldn't be fucking doing it.
Fucking preach, dude, right? Preach. So it's silly to me to watch people attempt to sway the fucking responsibility of being a parent. But once again, my realm of thinking with it is from a perspective of like, to be honest with you, when I see a child, it's anywhere from the ages of 3 months old to fucking 6 years old, right? Like, I have no idea. I have no way to tell. I think it's creepy if I did know, right? If I was like this fucking single guy who doesn't have kids was like, oh, that's a wonderful 3-year-old. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's way weirder. That's way weirder. But nevertheless, like I've been around a lot of people's kids and I'm like, is she walking? Like, does she talk? You know, I don't know. I have no idea. So from my position of ignorance, it's easy for me, I guess, to say, well, why don't you take your kid for hikes? You want to go for that hike? Why not just fucking put them in a backpack? They've got those stupid strap things and backpack things and stuff for babies.
Yeah.
Bring the kid with you, right?
But the thing is, when you do that, if the kid fucking hates it or like the kid,
it ruins
whatever,
it for you too.
And you got to take the kid out of the situation then, right? Because the kid is the most important thing.
Right.
So then people get like frustrated. They're like, well, this is what I wanted to fucking, well, too bad.
Too bad, bro. Like you said it like nail on the head, man. Like they did not consent to this.
Yeah.
They did not consent to being born. They just were.
Yeah.
So now you fucking deal with that. You're going to cause it, action and reaction.
Yeah.
Sorry you can't get fucking lit tonight, bro.
And
Sorry,
I think it's really fucked up that we say that kids are born with sin when they didn't even consent to be here.
Yes, dude.
I think that's fucked up.
So, but that goes against the common belief of that like I know Mormons do. I'm not sure if Catholics believe the same, but they say that the child picks its parents.
Yeah.
From the afterlife, because you're born into heaven or created in heaven, and then you're like, oh, I want to live in poverty, and like
yeah.
I don't get that nomenclature at all. I don't get how that's articulated.
I kind of do. So it's like you essentially pick your life path to learn certain lessons to be able to grow. So that means that the point of life is to grow and get better, and you're not reserved to be stuck where the fuck you are.
Right.
And it would behoove, and even so, I personally have like a belief where like my kid, and it's not a belief, it's fact. Like my kids have made me a better person because they'll say some shit to me and they'll be like, Daddy, why'd you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. Like there's literally no reason for it.
Right.
But on one hand, this baby boomer generation would be like, because I fucking said so.
Yes.
And then in our generation, there's more of this movement of like, well, you know what, son? You're right. You're right. And then what you're doing in that moment is you're teaching them that it's okay to be wrong and learning from your mistakes.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you don't learn from the mistake. You just continue to make it and pretend like everything's fucking fine. Fuck that. And that's why half the problems that we have in our country exist is because we pretended that there wasn't a problem.
Right. We swept shit under rugs, dude.
Or we said that we could pray away the gay.
Yes. So I know that one of the philosophies right now, or at least in like a more liberal leaning culture, is like the idea of unschooling. I don't know if you guys have heard that terminology.
No.
So it's where you teach. Yeah, it's where you teach your child only what they ask to know. So if your child flips over a rock and starts seeing all the bugs and it's like, what is that? You're supposed to teach them about the bugs then. So until they ask, you do not instill knowledge. I don't know how I feel about that personally. That's not how I would raise a child. I'd be like, hey, let's expose you to as much fucking knowledge as possible because your curiosity.
Okay. So what word? I want to define what you mean by knowledge here. Are you saying experiences, or are you saying sit them down at a desk and dictate to them?
So I would say more or less experience. So I believe that the unschooling philosophy is nice for the idea of if you go to the Loeb Observatory and your child looks through the telescope and sees the moon that up close for the first time, and they're like, whoa, like they have a curiosity spike to that, maybe indulge in that with them. You have all of human technology in your fucking phone, like all knowledge, all experience right there. So you can read that stuff with your child, experience that with them and be like, yeah, the moon's made out of a bunch of shit from here. And they theorize that it came from us from an asteroid strike and all this shit, right? However, I know that in public school, everyone here went to public school, I assume, right? Yeah. So most of the shit you learned wasn't from the classroom. Most of the shit you learned, or at least the curiosities and experience that you pursued, was from the other students, right?
Yeah.
Time for the phone call. So I think it's beneficial for children to learn in a tribalistic way. However, I would not have learned that I liked history without history class. Would not have
This
known.
is true.
Sure.
Without being exposed.
Yeah.
You said this the other day, like exposure to things that you didn't like. I don't remember what it was that you said, but it was like, I want to put myself in situations that I'm going to be afraid or I'm uncomfortable. And it's
adversity.
like, yeah,
the pursuit of adversity for growth. So I know that, like, so in recent memory, right? So I climbed Mount Humphreys here in Arizona, and that was one of the coolest experiences of my life to do alone.
Yeah.
One of the coolest fucking things, dude. I had to work that night. Shocking. So I had to like basically sprint up the mountain. I had enough time at the peak to drink a beer and then sprint back down the mountain. Yeah.
Nice.
So, so I have these weird little regrets that on the way up in particular, the only time I even stopped moving was to like snap a picture really quick of like, wow, that's a beautiful view. Snap. Keep running, bro. Like,
but you
over
didn't
and
sit
over
to
again.
experience it.
Yes, dude. So when I reached the summit, one of the things, like as I was drinking the stupid beer, I was thinking about the progression of the nature that I was observing. So when you initiate that hike, you're in ponderosa pines and aspen trees. You then ascend past the aspen trees growth line, and you're just in like spruce trees and fucking other stupid trees. And then you go beyond the tree line and you're in the tundra. And then beyond that, man, it's all just stone. And I'll never fucking forget it, man. Just sitting on the edge of this fucking mountain with eyes parallel to clouds and looking downward at the summit, I'm seeing crows fly below me, and I can see the peaks of all the mountains around me. And I was like, this is fucking profound, bro. Mm-hmm. And the idea to get up that mountain so rapidly and then to get back down it just as rapidly and take in that whole experience, like that was adversity in a strange way of that it was all on me. So a lot of the times when you do these types of events, whatever those are, long ruck marches, long swims, long hunting trips, whatever, you have a buddy there, and the buddy is either dragging you down or picking you up. It's very rare that you find someone that's very paralleled with you, that you guys keep the same pace without him being like, bro, come on, step it out. Or the exact opposite of like, hey, man, can we slow down a little bit? Like, my calves hurt, right? So to be alone in that environment and just keep on wanting to go up the fucking mountain, what I realized is it's a curse of almost anxiety. I don't know how to baseline it really, but it's too much goal orientation. The purpose of arriving at that mountain was to reach the top. It wasn't to experience the mountain. It was to get to the fucking top. So I did that as fast as humanly possible for me, right? There's benefits, I think, to that, but I think it's rooted in an anxiety. I think at the end of the day, that's rooted in the idea that it's like, well, if I don't do it, then I get nothing out of it. I have to finish it. I have to get to the top, or else it wasn't worth it. Nothing's worth it unless I finish it, right?
When?
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's also a thing of like talking to, like, I feel like you learned is like, it's okay to fucking slow down sometimes.
Chill the fuck out.
Take it in. Yeah.
Yeah. Calm down. You know what I mean? Like, not everything has to be this like hyper goal oriented shit. You can just enjoy, like, it's the old adage of like the journey versus the destination.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay to take in both as an equal pro. Even when like I get on my motorcycle and I'm like, I'm gonna just go for a ride today, I find myself setting fucking milestones where I'm like, you're gonna get to the next town over, like that's what you're gonna do. And then I get to that town and I'm like, what now, bitch? Like, next town, you know what I mean? Like, when it should just.
But I think sometimes you can make that goal and then throw it into your subconscious and then just chill.
So it's the 50-50 split. It's deeming that the journey is just as valuable as the destination. Or if the destination, it's slightly more important than the journey. So I know that when I PCS'd, for instance, from Washington to DC, I drove in a check mark across the states from Washington State to Arizona, from Arizona to Virginia. I never stopped driving. Never stopped, right? So my wife and I, we would switch seats at half a tank, and that person's job in the passenger seat was attempt to sleep, and then half a tank would hit, you fucking pull to the nearest gas station, swap seats, keep going. When we could have taken it as like a Like, we've got fucking 10 days. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we could have been like, hey, let's go see this. Let's go see that. Let's take a detour. But the goal orientation comes into play, and you're like, no, we're supposed to be in Virginia. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's silly, man. Looking back on that, it's missed opportunity. It's nothing that can't be rectified, but it's missed opportunity in that moment, right? It's the opportunity cost of being like, I want to get there now versus I will get there.
Yeah.
Because I don't. Good.
Yeah, well, it's like I feel like I've learned this through and hunting's a big thing to me. So like, I've learned this through hunting. So like before, as a child, and this was more like I used to be like the weekend guy, right? Like I never went on these like long excursions, I guess you could say. It was like the goal was to fucking kill a deer, or kill an elk, and like I really didn't think about like just being out in the woods. And like the older I got, I was like it's like I just want to be out in the woods, and like you get into this weird idea like I'm fine with like the experience of just going hunting, and like a lot of people are like, oh dude, you didn't kill anything. I'm just like, that's not really
you're a
the
failed
point,
hunter.
though.
You're a failed hunter.
Like, oh, I'm just like, well, that's fine, dude. It's just the facts is like you don't always get something. I enjoy being out there, and then like I get other people that come out with me, and I'm just like, this guy's like never done this, right? Or like I had a friend from Iowa come, and he did his first ever like Western elk hunt, right? Like he went from like the flattest land in America to like the rocky Eagle Cap Mountains of Oregon, right? And I'm just like, dude, like this isn't about me. Let's get your journey going. Like I've done this before. Like this weekend hunt's about you, where I'd find most people are like, I'm not gonna like step down. Like if I see an animal, like I'm gonna shoot it. I'm not gonna let somebody else, live that experience or whatever.
Right.
But like, and I'm just like, I've learned to be more about that journey and how fun it is.
Absolutely, man. Hunting's a great example of it because it's a lot of self-determination. Yeah. And one of the most mature hunting philosophies that I see is like the nice buck next year stuff, where it's like you'll see that forky or that spike and you choose not to fire. You choose to like fucking
let it get
put that arrow away, like, hey, nice buck next year, have a good one, bro. Even though like my intent of going out there for new age hunters, or I don't mean new age as in modern day, I mean newer hunters to the experience, 9 times out of 10 they're gonna shoot that forky. They're gonna shoot him. And it's like, what a shame, bro. Like, because he's going to be huge. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be a trophy eventually, right? Let him get to that.
But that's also comes with like learning something, right? Like they don't have the knowledge or the experience to essentially reach that older deer easier.
Yes.
So it grows with them, right? So like
absolutely
same thing. Like I was a kid, or like you think about it, like everybody has like a young hunter or a first time hunter. It's like, let's kill a doe or something, right? Or like a small deer. I don't know why. I feel like it's a cultural thing or whatever. But it's easier to do.
Let's start small.
Start small.
Give me a cow tag and then I'll kill a bull.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I don't hate that idea either, but like if you could also teach somebody like, hey, let's like, why are we passing on this, right? Like and that comes with like a lot of things in life, right? Like let's explain why, and then people are going to learn better from it. And like I've taken like new hunters like nowadays, I'm just like, hey, this is the reason I don't shoot it. Like I'm still going to give you your choice, and half the time they're like, okay, I'm not going to shoot that little deer.
Right.
It makes sense.
Right. So one of the things that like, especially this year, so I finished therapy. I shouldn't say finished. I stopped going to therapy early 2021. I didn't finish shit. There's no winning in that fight, not yet. One of the things that I took from that is to ask first time people experiencing something what their intent of the experience is, right? So if someone fresh to the gym comes to the gym with you, what's your intent for being here? Do you just kind of want to see what this is all about? Or do you want to, progress in health? Do you just want to be a beefstick? Like, what is your intent here? Okay. Same with hunting. It's like, okay, most people are going to say, I'm coming out here to kill. I want to get a kill. Okay. Let's see if we can achieve that. So we'll mitigate all the other things. I'll show you them, but I'll mitigate them, right? Because your intent of being with me this weekend is to shoot something or to get swole or whatever it is, right? Or if you bring someone out on dirt bikes, for instance, it might just be, well, I want to fucking go fast. okay, let's go fast. Let's find the straightest roads we can find in the forest and just let you rip that bitch down them, right? So clarifying the intent of the experience, I think, is really good for first-time experienced people. I think it's beneficial in most cases, unless they're like, I'm just here to be with you, man. And you're like, all right, well, this is going to fucking probably suck for you because it's not going to be your expectation.
Yeah.
It comes back to exactly what we were talking about with the relationships. Define your expectations for this moment, right? And that can obviously grow into define your expectations for this friendship, this relationship, this whatever. Because some people, man, like, so I've come to a realization this year also that in a lot of senses, for me personally, I've become a temporary friend for a lot of people, right? I'm only a friend when it's applicable. And that's so okay, right? Like that's fine. That's fine with everyone. You guys probably experience that same thing, but this dude only hits you up when he wants to play Call of Duty. Or this dude only hits you up when he has to vent about his girl. That's it. Like, that's your role in his life. You are that outlet. That's okay. Just let's define it.
Yeah.
So
like,
that I stop
friends that I just hunt with, right? Like, I don't really go to the bar with them. Nothing like they're like, hit me up, falls from it. Hey, dude, what are you doing? You know?
Right. And you know exactly what that call has to do with. Yeah. And sometimes those things don't need to be defined by them. They're just defined by you so that you manage your expectations. Because all of us have had that, like, that homie that we adapt to that we're like, you're my dude. And then they end up not being your dude, right? Or whatever. Or like in a relationship with a girl that her intent for you is she wants to bang. That's it. She doesn't want to get to know you. She doesn't want anything. Or she might just want dinner, right? She just wants the fucking dinner. And you supply her the dinner, and then you have transactional whatever from there. Right? It could be a transactional dinner, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So then a lot of people have to force feed that lesson into them, right? That you get your heart broken by like the bro you wanted, the friend you wanted, or the girl you wanted, that they viewed you as a transactional experience for this moment. And then you start to learn to manage your own shit.
Yeah, but in that same sense, you have to like put worth on yourself too, because if that's not what you wanted, don't be a part of it.
In my therapy, especially going through it in the beginning, there was this whole void inside of me of like self-worth. But I did not deem myself worthy of shit because I got told a stupid sentence by an unnamed family member that the only thing you're entitled to is dirt. That was like one of my fundamental sentences as a child that I was like, oh, okay, so I am dirt. Like I am entitled to die. Like that is where my line of worth ends, right? So, and then you start to, in the military, they teach you, if he dies, you take his spot. If you die, they take your spot. You are only useful if you are breathing. That's it. So this is a fundamental core element of the organizational structure of most militaries, is that there has to be someone in your shoes. And all we need is the body there. And then in civilian law enforcement, it's amplified as well, that you're not looking for a quality officer. You're just, hey, is this shift covered? Is there a cop in this beat or in this district? No? Fill it. Doesn't matter if they're quality or anything. Just hire a new guy. Throw them out there. It's shitty, but it's kind of the philosophy of our nation at this time, is that the seat must be filled.
Yeah.
By any means, at any cost, there has to be someone in that position.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like, hey, why do you want to do this really? Yes.
Yeah. What is your intent? Why do you want to do this? Whatever that is, in a relationship or a professional setting. So I had a really hard time working through like self-worth shit. And it took retrospect of being like, how did I get to my position right now? Which I think it's another thing baselined in anxiety, of being like imposter syndrome over and over again. Like, everyone's judging me and I don't belong here. Like I'm not part of this. Like, I'm not qualified. Like, that dude looks like a soldier. I don't. I'm fucking, you know what I mean? Whatever it is.
They all know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They can see that I'm not fucking confident or whatever it is. Yeah. So it was a lot of retrospective being sure that it's like, you belong here, bro. Whatever that setting is, like, stop worrying about everything else around you.
You are the protagonist of your life.
Yes. Or at least that's, a lot of people can say that, but how many people feel that? You're supposed to be the main character of your story.
Yep.
Whatever that is. I don't think that's as common because
It's not
because go to Walmart. Just go to fucking Walmart and be like, you're the hero of your story, bro. Like, that's wild.
Need a safer bank. I've been saving change. I need some space. Chatting in my face. Get from around my way.